Chapter 1465. The ancient stone gate stood between heaven and earth. The desolate and terrifying aura spread out in all directions, causing the depths of one's soul to tremble uncontrollably. When the last figure shot into the stone gate, the ancient gate shook violently. Then it slowly became illusory and finally disappeared from this world. It was a misty world, as if it was night. The moonlight was pale, and one could vaguely see countless erratic green flames swimming in the air, enveloping a radius of 100 kilometers. Dark, silent, desolate, strange, buzz. At that moment, the space suddenly distorted. Then, several figures slowly walked out of the distorted space, followed by dozens of streaks of baleful aura. It was Yi Qin, Taoist Beiyan, and the rest. Is this the Yin ruins? As soon as Yi Qin walked out of the spatial rift, he felt his feet sink. His body began to fall rapidly. He adjusted himself hurriedly before stabilizing himself. He was not the only one. Even the Patriarch of Hell and the rest were no exception. Many early-stage soul formation cultivators fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. What a powerful law of gravity! After the Patriarch of Hell stabilized his body, a solemn expression flashed across his face. The law of gravity here is at least 10 times that of Earth. Fellow Taoist Hell is right. Taoist Beiyan smiled faintly and said, something that weighs 50 kilograms on Earth is equivalent to 500 kilograms here. The stronger one's cultivation base is, the more terrifying the law of gravity they have to endure. When I first stepped into this place, I was also in a rather sorry state. Someone below cried out in surprise, "Look, what's this?" Everyone looked over and saw a sea of corpses and bones. There were all kinds of skeletons. Some belonged to unknown beasts, while others belonged to humans. They ranged from 1 meter to more than 10 meters. The sea of bones was boundless. From time to time, there would be flickering flames floating into the air from the sea of bones. If there were ordinary people present, they would definitely be scared to death by so many will-o'-the-wisps. So many corpses. Yi Chen's eyes focused slightly. He could not help but look at Taoist Beiyan after sensing the endless vile energy. Fellow Taoist Beiyan, where are we? This is the Demon Corpse Sea, located at the extreme west of Yin Su. Meeting everyone's gazes, Taoist Dark North couldn't help but explain. It's said that this place used to be an ancient battlefield that was filled with countless corpses and bones. It can be said that this place is filled with Yin energy, and most importantly, after 10,000 years, these corpses gave birth to Kacha! Before he could finish speaking, an exceptionally clear and ear-piercing sound suddenly rang out from the silent mountain of corpses and sea of bones. Under the pale moonlight, a human corpse that was closest to Yi Chen and the rest stood up slowly. Its pale joints made cracking sounds from moving too much. This sudden and strange scene would probably scare an ordinary person to the point of breaking down on the spot. Someone exclaimed, "It moved!" "Kacha, kacha!" Before the crowd could react, 1, 2, 3 corpses stood up in an extremely strange manner, followed by a series of bone-chilling sounds of joints cracking. Da-da-da, the corpses that seemed to have come back to life turned their skulls at the same time. As their chins moved, their empty eyes looked at Yi Chen and the rest. Under everyone's burning gazes, white flames appeared out of thin air between the eyebrows of the corpses that were initially empty. Yi Chen was surprised when he saw that soul fire. With his experience, he naturally knew that there were immortal cultivators, demonic cultivators, ghost cultivators, and corpse cultivators in this world. Corpse cultivators were divided into 2 types, zombies and undead. A person's body would not rot after death. Due to the special terrain, the corpse transformation was called a zombie. If the corpse decayed and only a corpse was left, and the corpse did not rot after countless years, it would gradually give birth to spirituality. The way this thing gave birth to spirituality was the soul fire, which was also the origin of undead life. Once the soul fire was extinguished, it meant that it would never be reincarnated. Kacha! In an instant, hundreds of corpses were resurrected. Hundreds of pairs of hollow bone eyes looked at Yi Qin and the rest in a strange manner. The Patriarch of Hell could not help but chuckle. What? Are these ignorant fools trying to rob us? They're at most equivalent to foundation-building cultivators. I can turn their bones into ashes in a single breath. The Patriarch of Green Spirit said disdainfully, "No, don't be rash." Taoist Beiyan hurriedly stopped everyone and quickly took a few steps forward. He cupped his fists at the hundreds of standing corpses and said, "Everyone, I'm from Hope City. This is my identity token. Please do me a favor." After saying that, he immediately flicked his sleeve, and a golden token with a 9-clawed golden dragon imprinted on it landed on the hundreds of corpses. Boom! Suddenly, a white bone hand reached out from the sea of bones. The bone hand easily caught the golden token. Soon after, under everyone's gazes, a silver corpse slowly stood up from the depths of the ground. Then it floated in the air and sized up everyone coldly. There was an incomparably vigorous flame between its brows. From afar, it looked like lightning was being born within it. As it appeared, the hundreds of corpses immediately knelt on one knee and kowtowed to the ground respectfully. Silver corpse! When the Patriarch of Hell saw this, he could not help but be extremely surprised. He clicked his tongue and said, "This is obviously an indestructible golden body. It seems like this corpse was also a powerhouse when it was alive. Its cultivation base is probably not lower than perfected soul formation. And it's a body, cultivator." Yi Qin added, "After ordinary cultivators died, their true origin energy and vital energy would dry up, and their bodies would collapse. If one wanted to maintain the indestructible golden body, they could only do so by focusing on cultivating their bodies when they were alive. So its fellow Taoist Beiyan from Hope City." The silver corpse nodded at Taoist Beiyan indifferently. Then it looked at Yi Qin and the rest with its hollow eyes. "Who are they?" "Fellow Silverwing, these people are all from China. I brought them to the Yin ruins to train." Taoist Beiyan said with a smile, "Training?" The silver corpse seemed to sneer. "China actually has such a powerful force. Looks like the other existences in the Yin ruins have underestimated you." With that, he waved his hand. "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, the hundreds of corpses behind him moved aside, opening up a path for everyone. "Thank you, fellow Silverwing. Please send my regards to Supreme Lord Triyu when you return. Our country came from the Devil Corpse. See to maintain our friendship." Taoist Beiyan cupped his fists again and threw a storage bag at the former. Then he led everyone away from the boundless sea of corpses and bones. On the other hand, Yi Qin looked at the depths of the Devil Corpse, thoughtfully. He could feel a terrifying aura there. End of this chapter. Chapter 1466. After Yi Qin and the rest left. Deep underground in the sea of corpse demons, in the mountain of coffins piled up by countless coffins, the silver-winged corpse was kneeling on one knee in front of a huge golden coffin. "Lord, I don't understand. We've already agreed to Old Man Tai Chu's agreement. Why did you let the people from China pass?" The silver-winged corpse prostrated in front of the golden coffin with his head lowered tightly. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. "Are you questioning me?" At that moment, a terrifying divine consciousness suddenly swept out from the golden coffin, causing the silver-winged corpse to scream in pain. He felt like his bones were about to fall apart. A gloomy voice came from the golden coffin. "Do you believe that if I had attacked just now, the sea of corpse demons would have been destroyed in an instant?" "What?" The silver-winged corpse felt like it was struck by lightning. "Lord, are you afraid of that person in the heavenly tomb?" No matter how powerful or overbearing that person in the heavenly tomb is, he's still shackled. Moreover, he's voluntarily imprisoned here. He can't do anything to me. The gloomy voice sounded again. What I'm truly afraid of is that one of the people who came with Taoist Bayan has been waiting for me to attack the entire time. The mad southerny that old man Tai Chu mentioned. The silver-winged corpse suddenly raised his head as if he had thought of something. Who else could it be other than this person? The voice in the golden coffin sneered, "This person can cause such a storm in the outside world. Naturally, he's not someone to be underestimated. It's not worth it for me to become enemies with him over old man Tai Chu. Moreover, this person has slaughtered too many people in the outside world. He's already made enemies all over the world. Now that he's entered the Yin ruins, I wonder how many people want him dead." An hour later, everyone walked out of the sea of corpse demons. What greeted their eyes was a boundless forest. The Patriarch of Hell glanced at Taoist Bayan in disdain. "Old man Bayan, you're a late-stage soul formation, old monster. Yet you're so servile to a bunch of bones." The Patriarch's actions were neither righteous nor evil. He would be extremely arrogant when he met someone he could defeat. When he met someone he could not defeat, he would retreat. Previously, in the sea of corpse demons, with his personality, he would naturally kill his way through. Anyone who stood in his way would be crushed. Unfortunately, Taoist Dark North kept gesturing at them with his eyes. Taoist Bayan looked at everyone when he heard Patriarch Yellow Springs' disdainful words. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. Everyone might not know, but the demon corpse sea isn't as simple as you think. What do you mean by that? Luo Tinya could not help but frown. Taoist Dark North took a deep breath, then said, "I trust that all of you have seen what happened just now. The corpse demon sea is a world of the dead, and the corpses of those who died long ago have used a different method to survive. For example, the corpse of Silverwing from before. This person was a martial cultivator that was just a step away from the martial god realm. At this point, he could not help but say slowly, 'The strongest in the demon corpse sea is not him, but the master of the demon corpse sea, Saint Triu.' Patriarch Yellow Spring's expression turned grave. Saint Lord Three Nether? Could it be a corpse comparable to the void training stage? Everyone's expressions changed. In other words, they had just passed through the territory of a void training stage cultivator? Taoist Bayan nodded slightly and said, "That's why I stopped everyone from attacking earlier. The demon corpse sea is sandwiched between the Yin ruins and the general mountain passage. Once we become enemies, the consequences will be unimaginable. Isn't it just a broken skeleton?" Patriarch Yellow Spring smiled disdainfully. "At my peak, I only needed to blow a breath to turn an existence like this into ashes. Fellow Taoist Bayan is right." Yi Qin nodded lightly and said, "I've also sensed Saint Lord Three Nether's aura. However, from the looks of it, it doesn't have any hostility towards us. He dares to be hostile?" Yang Haotian said fearlessly, "When the time comes, Uncle Yi will charge over with his sword and shatter his bones. Let's go!" Yi Qin glanced at him angrily and urged everyone to move forward immediately. It was his first time in the Yin ruins. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he did not want to become enemies with a void training stage existence. Of course, if there was really someone who was ignorant, he did not mind attacking. In the quiet forest, dense trees and hundreds of flowers competed with each other. From time to time, there would be birds flapping their wings, and groups of elk could be seen drinking leisurely by the gurgling stream. Compared to the strangeness of the demon corpse sea, the forest before them seemed extremely peaceful. However, everyone noticed that Taoist Bayan's expression was tense. "Old Bayan, what's wrong with you now?" Yang, how mocked the Patriarch of Hell's tone. "Shut up, you little brat." The Patriarch of Hell immediately rewarded him with a stir-fried chestnut. He then turned around to look at Yi Chen and said, "Fellow Yi, did you notice?" "It's too quiet." Yi Chen took a good look at the peaceful forest before him and said calmly, "How can there be such a peaceful forest in this chaotic Yin ruins, adjacent to such a strange place like the demon corpse sea?" "That's right." The Patriarch of Hell nodded slightly. His expression was even more solemn than when he was in the demon corpse sea. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly heard Song Chia say, "Did you guys hear anything?" "Nothing." Yang Hao was confused. Yi Chen looked into the distance. The sound of reading. Everyone pricked up their ears to listen. As expected, they immediately heard the intermittent sound of reading coming from afar. They could vaguely hear many people, as if an ancient scholar was studying for the exam. "There really is the sound of reading," Shi Qianhan said in surprise. "Strange. Why is there the sound of reading in this forest?" Let's go. We can't listen to the sound of reading." Just as everyone was in a daze, they saw Taoist Baiyan's expression change. He did not have time to explain, and he urged everyone to follow him. The direction he was walking in was the opposite of the source of the sound of reading. At that moment, his footsteps suddenly stopped, and he raised his head to look into the distance with a solemn expression. In front of him, a young man had appeared out of nowhere. The young man was dressed like an ancient scholar, and he was holding an ancient book in his hand. The young man's facial features were ordinary. He looked at everyone quietly with an extremely clear gaze. "Tell me, is it the heavens or the people?" Everyone was dumbfounded. Obviously, they did not expect the former to ask them such a question out of the blue. However, Taoist Baiyan smiled bitterly and solemnly cupped his fists at the young man. "Greetings, Lord Qianqiu. I'm Taoist Baiyan from China. We just want to—" Before he could finish, the young man looked at everyone indifferently again and said, "Tell me, is it the heavens or the people?" "Little friend, you're so boring. How can we have the mood to discuss the philosophical question of the heavens or the people with you?" An early-stage soul formation cultivator said impatiently. Then he gently pushed the young man. "You should move aside. Don't delay us." In the next moment, his entire body stopped abruptly. He did not move at all, as if he had been immobilized. The young man looked at everyone again and repeated, "Tell me, is it the heavens or the people?" End of this chapter. Chapter 14, 67. Fellow Zishu. Looking at the motionless early-stage God transformation stage, Cultivator, the Patriarch of Green Spirit and the rest called out, subconsciously. Then, they looked at the young man before them in shock. At this moment, they finally realized that the seemingly weak young man before them was not as simple as he seemed. Otherwise, how could he freeze an early-stage God transformation stage cultivator without anyone noticing? At that moment, the powerhouses behind Yi Chen stared at the young man, ready to fight at any time. Yi Wushuang's sword eyes were cold as sword intent surged. The Patriarch of Hell's expression froze slightly as he secretly sent a voice transmission to Yi Chen. "Fellow Yi, this person is probably no less powerful than Saint Lord Triu from the Corpse Demon Sea." Yi Chen looked at the young man quietly. 2 balls of golden divine fire danced in his eyes as he tried to see through the young man's background. However, under his flaming golden eyes, the young man was still ordinary, as if he was really a weak ancient scholar. It was the first time the flaming golden eyes could not see through anything. There was only one possibility. The young man's cultivation base was higher than Yi Chen's. "Don't be rash," Yi Chen secretly reminded everyone as he thought to this point. His intuition told him that the young man before him was not hostile toward them. Is it the heavens or the man? The young man's calm voice still echoed in everyone's minds. Taoist Baiyan's lips moved slightly as he said slowly, "Master Qianqiu, in my opinion, it's naturally the heavens." "Why?" The young man looked at him quietly. Under his gaze, Taoist Baiyan was actually a little nervous. Laozi said in the 25th chapter of the Tao Te Ching that there is something that is born from heaven and earth. It is lonely and indistinct, independent and unchanging. It can be called the mother of heaven and earth. I don't know its name. The word is called Tao, and the strong are called Dada is called death, and death is called distance. Distance is called reverse. Therefore, Tao is big, heaven is big, earth is big, and so is man. There are 4 great regions, and king is one of them. Man follows earth follows heaven, Heaven follows Tao, and Tao follows nature. He could not help but explain. Saint Laozi said that Tao was born before heaven and earth. Therefore, Tao is big, heaven is big, earth is big, and so is man. There are 4 great universes in the universe, and man is one of them. Man uses the earth as his law. The earth uses the heaven as its law. The heaven uses the Tao as its law. And the Tao is purely natural, using itself as its law. At this point, he took a deep breath and said, "That's why, in this humble Taoist opinion, the heavens are stronger than the men." However, the young man asked, "The Tao Te Ching mentioned that there are 4 great realms in the domain. Tao is great, heaven is great, earth is great, and man is also great. What about the outer domain? What happens when a person breaks through the restraints of heaven and earth and enters another domain?" Taoist Dark North froze on the spot, as though he had lost his soul. The young man shook his head slightly. Imitating the views of the ancients, but not understanding them, is foolish. You are destined to stop below the void refinement realm in this life. Guan Huai and couldn't help but say, "In this old man's opinion, it's a great man." The young man looked at him expectantly, Guan Huai, and said indifferently, "1 man is the great, and 2 men are the heavens. If there were no men, the great heavens would not be able to do anything. Man is the foundation. If there were no substance, how could there be an illusory body? Because this person is the strongest." Well said. That's reasonable. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately received cheers from the crowd. Obviously, most of them agreed with his opinion. Only Yi Qin, the patriarch of hell, and the rest remained silent. The young man shook his head again. The heavens don't speak arrogantly, and the earth doesn't speak arrogantly. Man is arrogant. Your words just show how insignificant you are and how vain your heart is. Guan Huai and's face turned pale when he said that. Everyone's expressions turned grim. Are you saying that the heavens are great or the people are great? You're not satisfied with answering the heavens, and you're still not satisfied with answering the people? Could it be that you're deliberately looking for trouble? The young man seemed to have not seen half of it. His gaze swept across everyone before finally landing on the patriarch of hell. "I wonder if you have any wise opinions, fellow?" "I don't deserve such praise." The patriarch of hell pulled a long face and sneered. "In my opinion, no matter how great the heavens are, they're not as great as me. If the heavens make me unhappy, I'll defy them. If people make me unhappy, I'll kill them." His words, which were rather rebellious in everyone's eyes, caused a ripple to appear on the young man's calm face. "The heavens are not as great as me." "Interesting, truly interesting." The young man imitated the patriarch's tone and repeated it as if he was praising him. In the end, his gaze landed on Yi Qin. "What do you think, fellow?" At that moment, everyone looked at Yi Qin in unison. Their eyes were filled with anticipation. To them, Yi Qin was younger than most of them, but he had gone further than them on the path of cultivation. Perhaps he had something extraordinary about his comprehension. Yi Qin did not answer the question, "What is human? What is heaven?" Everyone could not help but be speechless. The young man pondered for a moment and said, "The 4 legs of a cow and a horse are heaven. The head of a horse and the nose of a cow are humans. Therefore, it said, there's no man to destroy heaven, no life to destroy, and no name to be buried. To guard and not lose is to go against the truth." After saying that, he seemed to be worried that the crowd would not understand, so he explained, "All living things live as they are. Don't impose human factors on things. This is heaven. Imposing human factors on things, forcing a naked horse to put a cage on it, forcing a hole to pierce a cow's nose, and tying a rope to it. This is human. I've been to school for a few years and read a few books. If I remember correctly, you said that from Zhuangzi's quotations, right?" Yi Qin looked at him quietly and said, "Zhuangzi's words are about following nature. What is nature? It's the Tao. The heavens and the Tao can't be separated in the end. They merge into the heavenly Tao. Naturally, there will be floods and disasters. Isn't it the power of the heavenly Tao that controls everything? Aren't you telling us that we should follow the heavens? Follow the heavens? Since that's the case, it means that you've already determined that heaven is greater than man. Why do you have to ask me? As his voice fell, the young man suddenly clasped his fists at Yi Qin solemnly. He was extremely sincere. Thank you for clearing my doubts and waking me up. I'm Qianqiu Wuhen. When everyone saw that, they were so shocked that their eyeballs almost popped out, especially Taoist Beiyan. He knew how terrifying and stubborn the young man was. However, he was convinced by Yi Qian with just a few words. Qianqiu Wuhen could not help but look at Yi Qin. He said in anticipation, I wonder if fellow Yi thinks heaven is greater or man is greater. The Tao of heaven takes away the surplus and makes up for the deficiency. The Tao of heaven loves to kill. It doesn't change its will, and it only follows the inherent law. Those who go with the flow will prosper, and those who go against the flow will die. It treats all things like straw dogs. Yi Qin stood with his hands behind his back and said confidently, the way of man is to take away the deficiency and make up for the excess. The world is weak, and the strong will always be strong. The fruit is in the bag of the strong. At this point, he could not help but say, rather than saying that heaven is greater than man, it's better to say that the rules are greater. The reason why heaven is greater is because the rules set by man surpass all living beings. Not only can man set the rules, but he can also break them. Chapter 1468. Dead Silence. The surroundings suddenly fell into dead silence. Everyone fell into silence after Yi Qin said that. Even Qianqiu Wuhen was no exception. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, a burst of laughter erupted from the forest. Qianqiu Wuhen looked at Yi Qian with a smile. Very good, very good. Listening to you is better than reading for 10 years. With just a few words, fellow Yi solved the problem that I've been thinking about for countless years. At the next moment, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the forest from afar. Then, a dark green bamboo flute shot out from the forest. Fellow Yi, this is for you. He looked at the bamboo flute quietly and tossed it to Yi Qin. With this, you'll be my friends from now on. No one will dare to stop you on the way. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. Yi Chen reached out to catch the bamboo flute. He lowered his head and looked at it silently. There was a strange light in his eyes. The bamboo flute contained a concept that belonged to a void, refinement stage almighty. That bastard left just like that? The patriarch of hell looked around and smacked his lips. Everyone answered the question. Why did fellow Yi get the gift? Isn't this bastard too stingy? Fellow hell, please stop talking. Taoist Baiyan's face turned green when he heard that, and he immediately urged everyone to leave. Along the way, someone finally could not help but look at Taoist Baiyan and ask, Taoist Baiyan, who exactly is this Qianqiu Wuhen? From the beginning until now, everyone was confused. They could not understand why Qianqiu Wuhen would stop them, but he did not have any hostility. Instead, he asked such a seemingly absurd question. The forest that we passed through earlier is called the Demon Soul Forest. Taoist Baiyan stopped in his tracks and turned to look at the deep forest behind him. His lips moved slightly. This person is the master of the Demon Soul Forest. No one knows how long he has existed. They only know that he has lived in the Yin ruins for countless years. He is a taboo. Even the sage Sanya of the corpse demon has to respect him. As soon as he finished speaking, someone drew a sharp breath. Could it be that this person is also a void tempering stage cultivator? Everyone else's expression changed. They had just entered, but they had already passed through the territories of 2 void training stage old monsters. Were they lucky or unlucky? Fortunately, the 2 of them didn't attack them. I'm not sure. Taoist Dark North nodded slightly. Our Cathayans don't know much about this man either. All we know is that he once relied on a single piece of bamboo to slaughter his way into a forbidden zone. And when he returned, his clothes were not stained with blood. At this point, he immediately explained to everyone, Yin Ruins is very big, and it's currently divided into 3 areas, the periphery, the core, and the forbidden area. We're now in the periphery, and the area is no smaller than China. What? Even old ancestor Yellow Spring's expression froze when he heard that. They're already void, tempering old monsters guarding the outer perimeter. Doesn't that mean the core and the forbidden area are... Yi Chen's eyes gleamed faintly. No. Taoist Dark North shook his head and said, The terror of the core is not the people, but the mausoleums. It's said that countless peerless villains of China from 10,000 years ago are buried there. Apart from that, there are also violent spatial rifts and many geographical dangers. At this point, he was afraid that everyone would not believe him, so he added, I once personally witnessed a perfected soul formation cultivator trying to break into the core from the rift. In the end, he was forcefully killed by a hurricane. Not even his corpse was left, and his soul was destroyed. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air when they heard that. That was a perfected soul formation cultivator. In the outside world, he could practically sweep through the world. Yet, he could not defeat a hurricane? Yi Chen frowned and said, What about the forbidden area? The forbidden area is an ominous place. Taoist Dark North let out a heavy breath and said slowly, This place hasn't been unsealed yet. It's wrapped in endless black energy. As long as a living person touches a trace of the black energy, their flesh and blood will instantly disappear. Soul sand again? Yi Chen's eyes flickered. He had encountered the black energy, once on the ghost ship and again in the Forbidden Sea. Before he could think too much, Taoist Dark North added, Even the powerhouses of the outer realm are helpless against the forbidden area. It's said that a void refinement old monster from the outer realm gathered his disciples and tried to attack the forbidden area. In the end, before he could even step into the forbidden area, he was inexplicably killed by lightning. To say everyone could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their faces were incomparably pale, and their eyes were filled with intense shock. Even void refinement cultivators could not enter the forbidden area? Wasn't this forbidden area a little too terrifying? The Patriarch of Hell suppressed the shock in his heart. The forbidden area is so strange. It seems like there must be some great opportunity inside. That's right. Taoist Dark North said in a deep voice. It said that the opportunity to become an immortal is in the forbidden area. Therefore, all the living beings in the Yin Ruins, including the foreign immortal sects and the powerhouses of the various countries on Earth, are trying to enter the forbidden area. This Qinqiu Wuhan is too terrifying. Yang Hao muttered. Even void refinement cultivators can't enter the forbidden area. But he actually killed his way in with a bamboo pole and even escaped unscathed. Everyone was extremely dazed when they heard these words, and the figure of a young man with graceful bearing that seemed to be extremely weak couldn't help but appear in their minds. Such a person had done something that even void refinement cultivators could not do. At this moment, everyone noticed that countless divine consciousnesses were suddenly spying on them from the void. Before they could react, they were all retracted. Let's go. Guan Huayan's expression changed slightly. He looked around, worried that something would happen again. He could not help but urge everyone to continue moving forward. The Patriarch of Hell walked to Yi Chen's side and said with a cold smile, Fellow Yi, looks like someone wants to attack us. There's no need to guess to know that it's the Heavenly Lord of Absolute Beginning. Yi Chen scanned the void with a cold gaze. Unfortunately, I've overestimated them, so they're all a bunch of cowardly bandits. The Patriarch of Hell could not help but look at the dark green bamboo flute in his hand and said solemnly, It should be because of this. Is it Qinqiu Wuhan? Yi Chen mumbled to himself when he sensed the fluctuation of the concept on the dark green bamboo flute. However, what they did not know was that the entire Yin Ruins was stirred up because of their arrival. It's been 3,000 years. That person from the demon god forest hasn't appeared for 3,000 years. Now he's actually appeared. Qianqiu Wuhan, what kind of trick are you playing? You actually gave the demon god flute to an outsider. Forget it, forget it. Didn't you see that even Sage Sayu from the corpse demon chose to remain silent? The demon god forest is not to be trifled with, especially that lunatic Qianqiu Wuhan. In an instant, many terrifying existences woke up from various corners of the Yin ruins. They sighed and then quietly hid. End of this chapter. Chapter 1469. After passing through the demon god forest, everyone finally saw China's territory in the Yin ruins from afar. Everyone looked forward and saw a huge ravine that was hundreds of meters tall. The ravine was extremely deep and filled with endless poisonous fog. It was impossible to see the bottom. Yi Chen lifted his eyes and looked into the distance. He immediately saw an endless mountain range behind the ravine. The mountain range was tens of thousands of meters tall, like earth dragons crawling in this vast world. Ancient cities stood tall on the mountain range. They had towering city walls that seemed to have existed for an extremely long time. They were ancient, and the light from the formation was dazzling. Yi Chen could not help but say after seeing everything, "Is this China's territory in the Yin ruins?" The Yin ruins belonged to the desolate world, and it was filled with danger. Whether it was China, the countries in the world, or the foreign immortal sects, the first thing they did when they arrived was to conquer their own territory. That's right. Taoist Beiyan and Guan Huaiyan nodded in unison. After China stepped into the Yin ruins for the first time, we paid a huge price to occupy this place. We sacrificed many fellow cultivators. Does this place have a name? The Patriarch of Hell asked. Taoist Beiyan said, "This place is called Yan Huang Fortress." Yan Huang Fortress? Yi Chen could not help but nod in praise when he heard that the fortress where the descendants of Yan and Huang stand. It's a good name and the terrain is not bad. Relying on the huge ravine, it's easy to defend and difficult to attack. Guan Huaiyan cupped his fists and said, "Fellow Yi, wait here for a moment. I'll go and inform the people of the fortress to open the passage." With that, he turned around and rushed towards the fortress in the distance. The Patriarch of Hell said unhappily, "Why? Do we need to inform the others to enter? Old Beiyan, don't tell me you can't make the decision?" The others could not help but nod. Taoist Beiyan could not help but smile bitterly. "You might not know, but I'm not the one in charge of the Yan Huang Fortress. I'm one of the elders." "Who's that?" Yi Chen frowned. Under everyone's gaze, Taoist Beiyan said with a serious expression, "The person in charge of guarding the Yan Huang Fortress is an extremely ancient senior in China. He's called Lei Yunzi." Lei Yunzi? The others frowned inwardly as if they had never heard of this person before. The Yan Huang stronghold implements the Elders' Council system. There are a total of 13 seats. Fellow Taoist Qinshan and I are members of the Elders' Council. As if sensing everyone's bewilderment, Taoist Beiyan explained, "Senior Lei Yunzi is the Grand Elder of the Council of Elders. He's in charge of the Council of Elders and has the right to veto the Council of Elders." Taoist Beiyan added, "However, Senior Lei Yunzi's whereabouts have always been erratic. As a result, many matters in the Yan Huang stronghold are decided by a vote of the elders." As everyone was talking, they saw Guan Huaiyan return. His expression was somewhat ugly. "Fellow Taoist Guan, how is it?" Taoist North Fire couldn't help but ask. Guan Huai, and looked at Yi Chen and the rest in shame. He hesitated to speak. "The fortress refuses to let us in." "What?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone exploded. Taoist Dark Nertha's face changed slightly as well. "You're refusing to let us in? How is this possible? Senior Lei Yunzi didn't know it was us? Senior Lei Yunzi isn't in the stronghold." Guan Huai and said in a deep voice, "It's not just him. In fact, most of the powerhouses in the stronghold aren't here. The person in charge now is Gu Qing." It was this person who refused to let us in. Gu Qing, Taoist Beiyan, was furious when he heard that, be asterisk starred, this person is just one of the members of the Council of Elders. What right does he have to stop us from entering? What no one noticed was that Yi Chun frowned silently. Then he subconsciously glanced at Luo Tianya, Ning Mingtian, and the rest. Brother Yi, could this Gu Qing be? Luo Tianya walked to his side and whispered. Even Ning Mingtian, Song Chia, and the rest had ugly expressions. They had just killed Gu Xian and found out about the existence of the Gu family of the Shenyuan 8 clans. If this Gu Qing was really a member of the Gu family, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yi Qin nodded slightly and could not help but look at Taoist Beiyan. Fellow Taoist Beiyan, who is this Gu Qing? I'm not sure about this person's exact identity. I only know that he seems to have come from nowhere and is listed as a member of the Yan Huang Fortress's Council of Elders. Taoist Beiyan shook his head angrily. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, by the way, this person's cultivation base is at stage soul formation. Let's go. All of you follow me. I want to see how this Gu Qing is qualified to refuse us entry. With that, Taoist Beiyan flung his sleeves and took the lead to rush towards the black-yellow fortress in the distance. Brother Yi, if this Gu Qing is really a member of the Gu family. Luo Tianya looked at Yi Qin calmly and said, solemnly, the Patriarch of Hell said, what are you guys talking about? What Gu family? Yi Chen's lips moved slightly. He immediately told them about the Shenyuan 8 clans and Gu Xian through voice transmission. The Shenyuan 8 clans, the Gu family. The Patriarch of Hell was so angry that he laughed. Fellow Yi, there's no need to guess. This Gu Qing is definitely a member of the Gu family. He's trying to take us down a notch this time. Master, what should we do now? Song Chia frowned. What else can we do? Just kill him and be done with it. The Patriarch of Hell shouted as if he wanted the world to be in chaos. We'll settle the old and new grudges together. Kill Gu Qing first, then destroy the Gu family. Luo Tianya and Ning Mingtian's expressions changed when they heard that. Outside the Yan Huang fortress, in front of the huge heavenly stream, dozens of people stood in the air. Their expressions were solemn as they locked onto the huge city behind the heavenly stream. At that moment, the formation was activated, and the light screen covered the sky. There were also countless figures standing on the city walls. Both sides were at daggers drawn, and their auras were terrifying. Taoist Beiyan stared coldly at a black-clothed figure on the city wall and said coldly, Gu Qing, what are you doing? You're not the only one who has the final say in the Yan Huang fortress. Aren't you afraid of being severely punished by Senior Lei Yunzi for your actions? Under everyone's gazes, in front of the countless figures on the city wall, there was a black-robed old man with a sinister expression looking down at everyone. It was the Gu Qing that Taoist Beiyan had mentioned. There was also a crescent-shaped mark between his brows. Fellow Taoist Beiyan, why do you say that? Gu Qing smiled coldly. He looked at everyone and said with a fake smile, I'm only doing this for the safety of the Yan Huang fortress. Please forgive me if I've done anything wrong. Fellow Taoist Beiyan, I'll say it again. You and fellow Guan can come in. As he said that, his sinister gaze could not help but focus on Yi Qin. A fierce gleam flashed through his eyes as he said, however, apart from the two of you, I'm afraid I can't do anything about the others. End of this chapter. Chapter 1470. As his voice fell, behind Yi Qin, the North Immortal Temple Master, and the others were enraged. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Gu Qing was deliberately targeting them. Luo Tianya walked over and said with an ugly expression, Brother Yi, I'm afraid this person is really from the Gu family. Gu family! Yi Qin took a good look at the crescent mark between Gu Qing's brows. A cold smirk appeared at the corner of his lips. You guys are really courting death. The Patriarch of Hell saw the changes in Yi Chen's expression and felt a little excited. Every time Yi Chen revealed such an expression, it meant that someone was about to die. Fellow Gu, the person behind me is Mad Southern Yi of China. Your actions will be punished by the elders, Guan Huai, and said after taking a deep breath in. Mad Southern Yi? Hearing that, Gu Qing pretended to be surprised and glanced at Yi Qin. So, you're the Mad Southern Yi who has been causing commotion in the outside world recently. I've been disrespectful. In the next instant, the smile on his face froze and he sneered, I don't care if you are Mad Southern Yi or Mad Northern Yi. Today, with me, Gu Qing, here, you cannot enter the Yan Huang fortress. Is that so? Yi Qin suddenly chuckled. Taoist Dark North forcibly suppressed his anger, staring straight at Gu Qing. Surnamed Gu, this humble Taoist will ask you one last time. Are you really not going to open the tunnel to the fortress? He was worried that Gu Qing would infuriate Yi Qin, which would lead to an unmanageable outcome. By then he would be stuck in the middle. If you want me to open the passageway, you'll have to wait for Lei Yunzi's return. During this period, I'll have to trouble all of you to wait outside. Gu Qing laughed heartily before returning to the city. When he heard these words, Taoist Dark North's face completely changed. Yin Ruins was full of danger, especially at night. If there was no safe territory, even soul formation cultivators could die at any time. At this time, his vision suddenly blurred, and then he saw a figure rising into the sky, like a demon coming into being, heading straight for the light screen of the Yan Huang stronghold's spirit design. What's that? Everyone was stunned by this sudden scene, and when they reacted to it, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Fellow Taoist Yi, within the Yan Huang stronghold, in a spacious residence. As soon as Gu Qing entered, he said coldly, pass down my order. Gather everyone, and keep an eye on the group of people outside, especially that Mad Southern Yi. Hearing this, a mid-deity transformation, Cultivator wanted to say something, but hesitated. Elder Gu, if we do this, if Elder Lei Yun and the others return, impudent, you dare disobey my orders. Gu Qing's gaze turned cold, causing the former to lower his head. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, at the same time, send a message to Taichu Mountain and ask them to take the opportunity to ambush Mad Southern. Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly felt the ground beneath his feet shake violently, as if there was an earthquake. What happened? As Gu Qing's expression changed drastically, someone stumbled into the room and stuttered. Elder Gu, they attacked the city. What? Gu Qing was shocked at first. Then he smiled disdainfully and said, the defensive formation of the Yan Huang stronghold was set up by Lei Yunzi. There are also runes imprinted by the Shenyuan 8 clans. Even the heavenly venerable of Taichu Mountain can't do it in a short time. How can they break through it? With that, his figure flashed, and he immediately appeared on the wall. Boom! In the sky above the Yan Huang stronghold, a golden figure entered the void. His eyes were burning with divine flames, and he naturally wanted to burn this world. The defensive formation of the Yan Huang stronghold below was completely activated. Baleful energy howled, lightning rumbled, and earth fire spewed. Every strand of energy was enough to kill any perfected soul formation cultivator. That's Fellow Yi. At that moment, Taoist Beiyan and the rest stared at Yi Chan in the air. Clearly, they did not expect him to react like that. Fellow Yi, you can't. Sensing that Yi Chen's aura was rising rapidly, Guan Huayan's expression changed. He seemed to have thought of something and said hurriedly, you can't. This is the Yan Huang stronghold. You can't act recklessly. Hearing that, Taoist Beiyan's expression changed as well. Fellow Yi, the Yan Huang stronghold was built by China with great effort. Moreover, the defensive formation was set up by Senior Lei Yunzi. If you act recklessly, the consequences will be unimaginable. Unimaginable what? The Patriarch of Hell said lazily, isn't it just a lousy formation? If you break it, I'll compensate you. The Patriarch is right. That Gu guy is going too far. We have to teach him a lesson. Yang Hao cheered repeatedly, wishing for the world to be in chaos. Yi Chen lowered his head and sized up Taoist Beiyan. Fellow Beiyan, I've always been polite before resorting to force. I can choose not to enter the Yan Huang stronghold. But I and my fellow Taoists can't be bullied. Boom! At that moment, Gu Qing turned into a long rainbow and landed on the stronghold wall. He looked at Yi Chen coldly. Yi, what are you doing? After saying that, he narrowed his eyes and said sinisterly, Don't blame me for not reminding you. If you dare to act recklessly today, even Taoist Beiyan won't be able to protect you. There will be no place for you in the entire China. Although he said that, he could not wait for Yi Chen to cause as much trouble as possible. That was the only way he could make Yi Chen stand in an unjust position and become the target of public criticism. Noisy! Yi Chen scoffed softly. He lowered his head and looked down at the huge stronghold city. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. Do you guys really think that I'm useless with this turtle shell? Today, I'll show you that any formation can't withstand a single blow in the face of absolute power. He smirked coldly. After saying that, he slowly extended his hand and grabbed towards the distance. Rumble. Under everyone's shocked gazes, a 3,000-meter tall mountain in the distance suddenly trembled violently. Then it rose from the ground and charged at Yi Chen at a terrifying speed. At that moment, everyone was dumbfounded. Even Gu Qing, who was originally sneering, was no exception. Before everyone could react, another 3,000-meter tall mountain came from afar with a shocking bang. From afar, it looked like a star was falling. Yi Chen's arm suddenly expanded. Then he grabbed the first 3,000-meter tall mountain from afar and smashed it hard at the fortress's defensive formation light screen below. Bang! In an instant, the entire Yanhuang fortress's defensive formation exploded violently. Mountains collapsed and countless cracks appeared on the ground. The scene was as if the earth was shaking, black. Within the formation, everyone's faces, including Gu Qing, turned pale. Then they spat out a mouthful of scarlet blood, their faces filled with extreme shock. End of this chapter. Chapter 1471. Bang! Yi Chen grabbed the second mountain and smashed it down. The light screen of the Yanhuang stronghold's defensive formation trembled violently again. The heavenly lightning and earthly fire that had gathered within it exploded, and then dissipated one by one. The fourth one, Yi Chen, was like an ancient god who had transformed into a god. He used the purest form of his physical body to hurl mountains that were thousands of feet tall. They landed violently on the Yan Huang Fortress protective formation light screen. Boom! Finally, when he threw out the fifth mountain, the defensive spirit designs of the Yan Huang Fortress that the void-tempering old monsters had set up finally exploded layer by layer. Although this formation could block the attacks of void refinement stage powerhouses, there was a limit to it. After all, no void refinement stage powerhouse would ignore the existence of Lei Yunzi and the others like Yi Chen and attack the formation crazily. Taking 10,000 steps back, it was impossible for a regular void refinement old monster to have such a terrifying physical strength like Yi Chen's. Taoist Dark North, who had personally witnessed all of this, was completely stupefied. From Taoist Beiyan's perspective, it was almost impossible for Yi Chen to break through the Yan Huang stronghold's formation with his own strength. However, the incomparably violent scene before her greatly shocked her. Even Patriarch Yellow Spring, who was mentally prepared, was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. Oh my God! Fellow Taoist, Yi is too abnormal. Uncle Yi is invincible, too fierce. Yang Hao watched all of this with a flushed face. He felt as if the blood in his body was about to boil. On top of the city wall, Gu Qing and the others watched this scene in fear, their eyes trembling. Fortunately, the formation can still hold on. Gu Qing could not help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw that the Yan Huang stronghold's defensive formation was still struggling to hold on despite Yi Chen's relentless attacks. Really? Yi Qin suddenly stopped when he heard that. A ferocious gleam flashed through the depths of his cold eyes. I'll show all of you what it means to break all techniques with a single artifact today. His voice fell. The shadow of a golden divine brush suddenly shot out of his body, violently cutting through the air and sweeping everything in its path. It was the Emperor brush. Yi Chun held the Emperor brush in his hand and wrote the word break on the formation light screen of the Yanhuang fortress. In an instant, heaven and earth changed color, and a strange phenomenon appeared. Under the dark clouds, there seemed to be a golden dragon descending from the sky, accompanied by an earth-shattering dragon roar. It slammed into the light screen of the Yanhuang stronghold's array formation. Not good! The formation is about to break! It was unknown who cried out. After that, the defensive formation, which was known as the strongest defensive formation, completely collapsed. Violent energy swept out in all directions, destroying everything in its path. At that moment, the heavens and the earth were deathly silent. Taoist Dark North seemed to have been petrified. He stared at everything in front of him, completely unmoving. On the city wall, Gu Qing and the others stood stiffly. Their eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. At that moment, the Corpse Demon Sea and Demon God Forest, which were closest to the Yanhuang stronghold, sensed this scene through the void. The Demon Corpse Sea, in the depths of the endless mountain of corpses and sea of bones, a golden coffin stirred, and a voice filled with fear came from within, carrying the 5 mountains and breaking the divine formation. This brat's physical body is truly terrifying. This voice was replaced by a sneer. This person broke Old Ghost Lei Yun's formation. When Old Ghost Lei Yun returns, he will definitely not let this matter rest. It's getting more and more interesting. In the quiet valley of the Demon God Forest, Qianqiu Wuhen, who was dressed in green, held a willow leaf in his mouth. He faced the mountains alone and blew gently. His clothes were fierce and he looked elegant. After he finished playing, he looked in a certain direction and muttered, "That fellow in the heavenly tomb, you're quite fast." You took a fancy to this brat before Wuhen. His gaze was clear. Unfortunately, with his current ability, I'm afraid he's still unable to help you escape. Unless this brat can dye the forbidden land with blood. In the sky above the Yanhuang fortress. How is this possible? After a short period of dead silence, cries of surprise immediately rang out one after another, and the cries were mixed with trembling. The powerful and terrifying defensive formation of the Yanhuang fortress had been broken by Yi Qin alone. This method is simply too terrifying. Guan Huai's face was pale as he said in a trembling voice, "It's just that this matter has completely blown up." Good break, good break. Patriarch Yellow Spring laughed arrogantly and said, "I'd like to see what that old man Gu has to say now." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone saw Gu Qing and the others on top of the city wall suddenly turn into black shadows and fly toward the mountain behind the fortress. The leader, Gu Qing, had messy hair and torn clothes. His eyes were bloodshot. Clearly, he was affected by Yi Chen's technique. Bastard! How can this mad southern Yi be so powerful? Even old geezer Lei Yun's formation can't stop him. Gu Qing did not dare to look back. He only focused on escaping with all his might. His eyes were filled with hatred. I have to escape. Only by escaping to where the Patriarch is will I have a chance of survival. He shuddered at the thought of what would happen to him if he fell into Yi Chen's hands. However, in the next moment, his footsteps stopped abruptly. Then he looked at the figure that was blocking his way with incomparable fear. He shuddered and turned around abruptly. His path of retreat was instantly blocked by a sword gleam. Yi Wushuang, who was dressed in white, walked over coldly. Boom, 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 in an instant, Hall Master North Sea and dozens of soul formation cultivators surrounded him from all directions, forcefully cutting off Gu Qing's path of retreat. The Patriarch of Yellow Spring chuckled. "Old thing, Weren't you quite arrogant earlier? Why are you trying to run now? Gu Qing's expression could not help but change when he heard that. He then turned around and looked straight at Yi Chen. Mad Southerny, my Gu family is not something you can imagine. If you dare to touch me, the Gu family will not let you off. As soon as he finished speaking, Daoist Beiyan and Guan Huai, and could not help but stand up and say in unison, Fellow Yi, no matter how much of a bastard Gu Qing is, he's still a member of the elder group. You can't kill him. If we don't kill him, are we going to keep him alive for the new year? Yang Hao shouted. The patriarch of Yellow Spring sneered, Kill him, extract his soul, burn his bones to ashes, and suppress him for eternity. Kill. The killing intent of Hall Master North Sea, and the rest soared. Seeing this, Gu Qing's expression changed again and again, and his tone could not help but soften. Fellow Yi, I apologize for my impulsive behavior earlier. I hope you won't be impulsive. My Gu family is willing to be on good terms with you. There's no need. Yi Chen's gaze turned cold as he said coldly, From the moment your Gu family, Gu Xian, ambushed me, I'm destined to be incompatible with your Gu family. After saying that, he reached out his hand and directly ignored Gu Qing's resistance, capturing him on the spot before forcefully wiping him out. Daoist Beiyan wanted to say something, but hesitated. Subsequently, he met Yi Chen's cold gaze and could only sigh softly. Fellow Yi, you've caused great trouble. End of this chapter. Chapter 1472. Fellow Yi, you really shouldn't have killed Gu Qing. Seeing that Yi Chen had killed Gu Qing decisively, even Guan Huaiyan had a bitter and helpless expression on his face. This person deserves to die. Why didn't you kill him? The Patriarch of Hell looked at the two of them with disdain. The two of you are so cowardly. Why are you still talking about cultivation? Daoist Beiyan's lips moved slightly, but in the end he could only sigh softly. It's not that I'm cowardly, but that Gu Qing is one of the elders and he's also from the Gu family. So what? Fellow Yi can even flatten the Taichu dojo. Isn't it just a small Gu family? The Patriarch of Hell became more and more disdainful. So what if I killed him? I've never regretted it. Yi Chen's expression did not change as he said calmly, Today's matter has two witnesses. Black and white will be decided. If the elders intend to help Gu Qing, then I'll take it on. After saying that, he slowly landed on the ground and walked back the way he came. Without turning his head, he said, Patriarch, let's go. Seeing this, Daoist Beiyan could not help but ask subconsciously, Fellow Yi, where are you going? Since the Yan Huang fortress doesn't welcome me, then I won't be thick-skinned and force you to stay, Yi Chen said calmly. The world is vast, so there's naturally a place for me. That's right. If this place doesn't want me, there will be a place for me. The Patriarch of Hell was the first to follow, followed by Yang Hao, Luo Tianya, and the rest. Daoist Beiyan's expression immediately changed, and then he chased after him. Fellow Yi, this is all because of Gu Qing. I hope you won't take it to heart. That's right, Fellow Yi. We never said that you're not welcome to enter the Yan Huang fortress. Guan Huaiyan explained bitterly. I understand your intentions. Yi Chen turned around and looked at them. My actions this time are undoubtedly a slap in the face to the elders. At the same time, I've also formed a grudge with the Gu family. Instead of staying under someone else's roof, it's better to find another way out. With that, he left with a large group of people under Daoist Beiyan and Guan Huaiyan's gazes. Sigh this matter. Guan Huai, and smiled bitterly. Daoist North Fire shook his head slightly, his face ashen. It's all Gu Qing's fault. Once the Council of Elders returns, I will definitely report this matter to Elder Thundercloud. I refuse to believe that the Gu clan can hide the truth from the Council of Elders. On the desolate land, the soil was extremely dark and cold, as if the soil of the underworld had enveloped this world. Countless shrubs growing in the black soil were like monsters that had awakened from the nine hells. They extended their branches that looked like hideous arms and hunted all living beings that passed by. Ka, ka, ka! As Yi Chen and the rest walked past, Countless demonic trees that were soaked in demonic energy extended their branches and vines and charged at the former, courting death. The old ancestor Yellow Spring opened his mouth and spat out a wisp of fire. The fire swept out and directly incinerated the tentacles that were approaching. Although there was only a trace of the fire, it extended back along the tentacles, and then all kinds of strange cries of babies could be heard. "Get lost!" The old ancestor Yellow Spring shouted. The many demonic trees that were originally blocking everyone's path seemed to have intelligence. They retreated into the distance, frantically, instantly opening up an extremely spacious path for everyone. Only then did the old ancestor Yellow Spring lower his head and grab a handful of soil that seemed to have been soaked in ink. He sniffed it lightly and said with a frown, "Fellow Yi, there's such powerful demonic energy here." "It's indeed demonic energy." Yi Chen nodded lightly and said, "However, where did so much demonic energy come from? It's tainted this place to such a state. Even the original creatures have been demonized. Orthodox cultivators mainly relied on absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to cultivate, and demonic energy was undoubtedly a fatal poison to them. Demonic energy only existed in the devil world. However, Yin Su was densely filled with demonic energy." Yi Chen and the patriarch could not help but be puzzled. Everyone looked at their feet with serious expressions. At the same time, they were extremely careful not to breathe in any of it. There are only two possibilities. The old ancestor Yellow Spring frowned and said, "Firstly, there might be creatures from the devil world in Yin Su. Secondly, the demonic energy from the devil world has seeped into Yin Su." Yi Chen's eyes flashed imperceptibly when he heard that. Of the patriarch's two speculations, the first one was fine. If it was the second one, it would be a calamity for Yin Su and even Earth. When the demonic energy descended, it would turn into a sea of demonic energy that would assimilate everything. All living beings, including humans, would turn into demonic creatures that had lost their minds and become puppets of the demons. Yi Chen could not help but turn around and say to everyone as he thought to this point, "Yin Su is not simple. Everyone be careful." The old ancestor, Yellow Spring's expression was solemn as well. Although he was known as a demon in the cultivation world before he died, he knew that he was far inferior to the people of the devil world. Songqia looked around and could not help but ask, "Master, where are we going next?" "Let's find a place to stay first," Yi Chen said after thinking about it. He was not familiar with Yin Su at the moment. He could only find a place with more people to understand more before talking about other things. The reason why he came to Yin Su was firstly to find something to prolong Su Yuhan's life. Secondly, it was to find Yang Tian and the immortal slaying flying saber. The only thing that puzzled him was that he could not sense the aura of the immortal slaying flying saber, even though he was in Yin Su. Thinking to this point, he could not help but ask to himself, "Emperor, can you still sense the aura of the immortal slaying flying saber?" "Your Majesty, the aura in Yin Su is too mixed. I can't sense the whereabouts of the immortal slaying flying saber," Emperor Brush said in a deep voice. The night demon armor chuckled and said, "The immortal slaying flying saber loves to fight people. Could it have been killed? Could it be that he's in the core or the forbidden area?" Yi Chen's eyes flickered as he thought to himself. As night fell, an extremely huge crimson moon enveloped the sky. The moon was extremely huge. From afar, it looked like a stone mill. There was a bonfire burning on the ground, accompanied by the fragrance of meat. "This moon is really ugly." Yang Hao looked up at the crimson moon above his head as he chewed on a piece of roasted meat. "Uncle Yi, do you think this moon is the same as the moon on Earth?" Just as he finished speaking, someone suddenly said, "Look, that moon seems to be growing bigger." Everyone immediately looked over and were surprised to find that the crimson moon above their heads was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. At first, it was only the size of a stone mill, but in the end, it was no different from a dustpan. The strangest thing was that the moonlight that the crimson moon shone down made people feel irritated uncontrollably, as if the most primitive desire in their hearts was gradually awakened. Roar! At this moment, waves of earth-shattering and violent roars suddenly rang out in the originally silent world. End of this chapter. Chapter 1473. Rumble. Immediately after, the entire ground began to shake violently, as if thousands of troops and horses were fighting and beasts were galloping. In this desolate land, ferocious beasts roared and giant birds tore the sky apart. It was completely chaotic. Luo! Tinya turned pale with fright. What happened? Roar! Before the crowd could react, the roar of a huge beast reverberated in their direction. Then they saw a giant bull with a body of 500 feet tall. Its entire body was as red as blood, tearing through a mountain, bringing with it an endless stench of blood. Beast attack! Someone exclaimed. In the next moment, everyone felt the sky darken. They saw a huge black shadow covering the sky, completely covering a radius of 300 meters above the ground. It was a black, ferocious bird that was over 300 meters long. When it spread its wings, it was like a small mountain. The giant bird split the sky and flapped its wings. Like a huge, dark cloud, it descended from the sky and headed straight for the blood-red bull that was running on the ground. Moo! The blood-red bull's eyes were like a bell, and the pair of red horns on its head suddenly expanded. It seemed to have turned into two peerless weapons as it charged at the giant bird. Boom! An intense battle immediately broke out between the two. Every strike caused heaven and earth to tremble, and the aftermath of the explosion even shattered all the surrounding mountains. They're not coming for us. Retreat! Yi Qin swept his sleeve and carried Song Chia, Yang Hao, and the rest as he retreated to a safe distance. After everyone landed, they were all shocked by the terrifying battle scene in the distance. This is a battle between two perfected god transformation stage demonic beasts. Fortunately, their target isn't us. Yang Hao's face was a little pale. On the other hand, Yi Qin took a deep look at the crimson moon above his head that seemed to have been soaked in blood. He then looked at the two beasts fighting intensely in the distance and revealed a thoughtful expression. Rumble! The two beasts that were comparable to perfected god transformation stage fought to the death, staining each other with blood and burning everything around them. Roar! At this moment, a blood-colored dragon broke out from the ground and joined the battle in the distance. The battle was intense, and its momentum was shocking. It shook the surroundings like a soul-sucking demonic sound, causing everyone to feel immense pressure. Fellow Yi, they seem to be out of control. Patriarch Yellow Spring fixed his eyes on the fierce battle in the distance. He looked at the huge crimson moon above his head and said, "There's something wrong with this moon." As soon as he said that, a furious roar suddenly came from the crowd behind Yi Qin. Then, an early-stage god transformation stage, Cultivator, attacked the person beside him with bloodshot eyes. The man was caught off guard and immediately screamed, "Fellow Taoist Songyang, what are you doing?" At the same time, 3 more people lost control and attacked the people around them. "Are you guys crazy?" The North Immortal Hall Master roared. Yi Chen's eyes turned cold when he saw that. He took a step forward and suppressed them on the spot. At the same time, he unleashed the heavenly dragons, ate music, and roared, "Everyone calm down. Don't let your imagination run wild." As soon as he finished speaking, someone immediately sat down cross-legged and chanted the clear mind incantation in an attempt to calm himself down. Seeing that Yang Hao was showing signs of losing control, the Patriarch of Hell immediately pointed a finger between his brows. Only then did Yang Hao's face turn pale. Yi Chen said again, "There's something wrong with this moon. It can bewitch people. Don't fall for it." Fortunately, this process did not last long. Everyone realized that the crimson moon in the sky began to shrink. In the end, it returned to the size of a jade plate, and its color changed from blood red to pale white. Roar! At the same time, The outcome of the battle between the three beasts in the distance had been decided. 2 were dead and 1 was injured. In the end, the one that survived was the ferocious bird that was over 300 meters long. The ferocious bird's crimson eyes landed on Yi Qin and the rest. It seemed like it wanted to attack them. Yi Qin scoffed coldly as his terrifying divine consciousness swarmed over. "Evil creature! I'll kill you if you don't scram!" Rumble. The ferocious bird felt an explosion in its head as if it had been struck by lightning. It shuddered immediately and glanced at Yi Qin in fear. It flapped its wings that were on the verge of breaking and flew into the sky. At the same time, the countless beast roars from all directions returned to silence. Only the smell of blood rippled in the wind. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief. Shi Qianhan recalled the dangerous scene from before and said with a pale face, "Brother Yi, what about the moon just now?" "That is the crimson blood moon." Yi Qin said, "Slowly, this item can bewitch people and make everything go berserk. If I hadn't reminded you guys in time, I'm afraid you guys would have lost control." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone felt extremely fortunate. "This place is too scary." Ancestor Azure Spirit was still in a state of shock as he said, "Just one blood moon caused such a huge commotion. Who knows what awaits us in the future?" Ka, ka, ka! At this moment, the sound of joints cracking suddenly rang in everyone's ears. Then, everyone saw a skeleton suddenly stand up from the swamp in the distance. It was a human skeleton that was roughly 8 meters tall. There was an extremely dim, white flame between its brows. It only had 1 leg bone, which made it extremely difficult for it to stand. The strangest thing was that the front of its skull was facing the back of its waist. Then it lowered its head as if it was searching for something in the swamp. In the end, it actually took out a thigh bone and attached it to its leg. However, that thigh bone did not seem to belong to it. It seemed a little short. Even after it was barely attached, its legs were 1 high and 1 low. Damn, why is it this thing again? Yang Hao's scalp tingled, and he could not help but curse. Ka, ka, ka! At that moment, it seemed to have noticed Yi Qin and the rest. Its dim soul fire flickered a few times. Then it walked over slowly with its back facing Yi Qin and the rest stiffly. What is it trying to do? Yang Hao took a step back subconsciously. Even though the human skeleton looked very weak, as if it could be crushed with a single stomp, its terrifying appearance still gave him goosebumps. Yi Qin watched it approach quietly. He did not attack because he did not sense any hostility from it. After the human skeleton walked before them, it seemed to be sizing them up in a daze. It could not understand Yi Qin and the rest's physique and appearance. Eventually, it fixed its gaze on Yang Hao. It walked over and pointed at Yang Hao. Then it pointed at its reverse skull. F***CK, what are you doing? Yang Hao wanted to kick it by instinct. Patriarch Yellow Spring chuckled gloatingly and said, "Little brat, it wants you to help it straighten its head." What? Yang Hao's face turned pale immediately. He immediately shook his head like a rattle drum. However, the human skeleton continued to gesture at him. In the end, Yang Hao could not argue with it. He gulped and placed his trembling hand on its skull, gently straightening it. After he was done, he hurriedly said, "All right, get out of here." However, the human skeleton shook its head. It then turned around slowly and waved at them in an extremely stiff manner. What does it mean? Yang Hao was confused. Yi Qin said in thought, "It seems to be asking us to follow it. It seems to be bringing us somewhere." End of this chapter. Chapter 1474. Late at night, everything was silent. The world seemed to have fallen into a deathly stillness. Only the pale moon was looking down at the earth, giving people a strange feeling of oppression. Crack, crack, crack! Under the pale moonlight, a human-shaped skeleton could be seen walking stiffly in the middle of a swamp, with a dim soul fire flickering between its eyebrows. The people who were following behind the humanoid skeleton were confused. Where is it taking us? Follow it. Yi Qin took a good look at the humanoid skeleton walking at the front. An undetectable gleam flashed through his eyes. Logically speaking, existences like the undead were concentrated in the corpse demon sea. But everyone was still a long distance away from the corpse demon sea. Why would there be a humanoid skeleton? Crack, crack, crack! At that moment, the humanoid skeleton suddenly stopped. It moved its stiff joints and lowered its head to size up the gray area in the distance. Faintly discernible, a faint black aura spread out from the gray area in the distance. From afar, it looked like a patch of dark clouds. Be careful, it's zombie miasma, Yi Qin reminded everyone. It's very likely that there are zombies here. As soon as he said that, a roar suddenly came from the gray area. Then, a furry black shadow jumped out. Behind it were 3 humanoid skeletons. When he saw that the black shadow was just a black zombie, the Patriarch of Hell could not help but laugh. It's really a zombie, but it's just a black zombie. Its level is too low. At most, it's equivalent to a foundation building cultivator. Tap, tap, tap. Although the black zombie was standing straight, its movements were extremely agile. It was like a black hurricane as it charged towards the humanoid skeleton in front of everyone. At the same time, the 3 humanoid skeletons behind it also joined forces to attack the former. Clearly, they had planned this for a long time. Be careful, Yang Hao reminded, subconsciously. Under everyone's gaze, the humanoid skeleton leading the group advanced instead of retreating. With a whoosh, it took the initiative to meet the 3 stiff skeletons. Swoosh! The humanoid skeleton's speed was extremely fast. Its bright, white bone claws landed on the 3 stiff skeletons, one after another. Uft! The zombie in the lead was instantly chopped into 2 halves at the waist by the skeletal claws, and the 3 skeletons behind it had their skulls chopped off. This was a battle where they had the advantage in numbers. Following the powerful counterattack of the humanoid skeleton, the final result could be said to be out of everyone's expectations. At this moment, even Patriarch Yellow Spring, who had been indifferent all this while, was shocked. One had to know that the humanoid skeleton in front of them was so weak that it was only at the spirit gathering stage. Yet it was able to easily kill a foundation establishment stage black zombie and 3 skeletons of the same level. Immediately after, the human-shaped skeleton slowly walked toward the 3 skulls on the ground, its mouth moving up and down. It actually absorbed the soul fire between the eyebrows of the 3 skeletons. At the same time, the originally dim soul fire between its eyebrows became much more condensed, and the flame gradually turned from white to red. Even the color of its bones had turned red. At that moment, the Patriarch of Hell's expression changed completely. Fellow Yi, it can actually devour its own kind. Yi Chen stared fixedly at the humanoid skeleton that had undergone a transformation. His star-like eyes flickered nonstop. Undead were also known as undead creatures. The way they advanced was usually to cultivate their own soul fire. As the soul fire grew stronger, they would advance. This process often took thousands of years. However, among them, there were some favored children of fate who could devour the soul fire of their own kind to advance. However, such existences were usually not allowed by the heavenly Tao. Every time they appeared, they would be destroyed by the heavenly punishment. Now they had witnessed a favored child. The Patriarch of Hell looked at the transformed humanoid skeleton quietly. It has advanced. It's no weaker than the foundation establishment stage now. This person must have been extraordinary when he was alive. That's right, Yi Chen nodded lightly. The classification of undead was not as complicated as that of cultivators. Their strength was measured by the strength of the soul fire, and the strength of the soul fire was differentiated by color. From low to high, they were red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Above them were silver and gold, just like the silver skeleton known as Silverwing that Yi Chen had seen in the corpse demon sea earlier. Crack, crack, crack! At that moment, the red skeleton lowered its head and reached out its bone claws to easily pierce through the black zombie's heart. Then, it took out a black crystal core about the size of a pigeon's egg. It held the black crystal core, just like that, then turned around and walked towards the crowd. It gently handed it to Yang Hao as its mouth made a gurgling sound. "What is it doing now?" Yang Hao said with a grim expression. The Patriarch of Hell laughed gloatingly. "It wants to give this zombie's corpse core to you for you to eat." "What?" Yang Hao was stunned. He looked at the black crystal core and said subconsciously, "What's the use of eating this? Can it make me invulnerable, like a zombie?" "Sure." The Patriarch of Hell chuckled and said, "Not only can it make you invulnerable, but it can also make you a zombie." Yang Hao's face turned green when he heard that. He shook his head like a rattle drum. "No, I don't want it." The others could not help but laugh when they saw that. When the red skeleton saw that, it had no choice but to stick the crystal core between its brows. It used its soul fire to melt it into energy, and then absorbed it. It could even absorb a zombie's crystal core? Yi Qin and the Patriarch of Hell could not help but look at each other when they saw that. They saw the shock in each other's eyes. The red skeleton turned around and walked out of the swamp again. It would turn around and wave at the crowd from time to time as it walked. Yang Hao had goosebumps. He really did not want to continue following. He said while swallowing his saliva, "Uncle Yi, why don't we go back? It's fine. Let's follow and take a look." Yi Qin patted his shoulder, while smiling and gestured for everyone to follow. He was getting more and more interested in the skeleton. After an hour, everyone followed the red skeleton from afar to a place overlooking a cliff. Although it was a cliff, it was extremely wide. It was enough to build a small village with 200 people living on it. However, the strange thing was that the cliff was a barren land. There were no plants or living creatures at all. It was barren, and there was only extremely pitch-black land mixed with scarlet liquid. As soon as everyone arrived, they felt an unusually hot temperature coming at them, as if they were in a furnace. "It's so hot, so hot," Yang Hao complained. The red skeleton did not stop at all. It led everyone forward and finally stopped in front of a huge rock. "What's that?" Someone pointed at the fire in the distance. Everyone immediately looked over and saw a huge volcano crater. The most shocking thing was that there was a resplendent treasure light shooting out from the volcano crater. They could vaguely see ancient buildings standing inside. Chapter 14, 75. What a powerful treasure light! The Patriarch of the Heaven Nether sect in the crowd ignored the scorching heat around him and stared fixedly at the crater in the distance. The Patriarch of Hell said, "There seems to be a building in the crater. This should be a ruin." Yi Qin activated his golden pupil fiery eyes and immediately saw an ancient hall floating in the magma in the crater. The ancient hall was dazzling with golden light as it floated. There was a faint aura of time flowing on it. Hearing that, the originally listless Yang Hao immediately perked up. "Ruin? Doesn't that mean there's a treasure inside?" "There's definitely a treasure. The problem is, do you have the ability to take it?" The Patriarch of Hell looked at him in disdain. Yang Hao's face fell at first. Then he smiled at the Patriarch and said, "Patriarch, don't we have you and Uncle Yi? Why did Yang Tian give birth to a brat like you?" The Patriarch of Hell scolded as he smiled and enjoyed it. At this moment, Song Chia suddenly said, "What is it doing?" Everyone immediately looked over and saw that the red skeleton that had stopped earlier was actually walking towards the crater, as if it was not afraid of the scorching heat. "It's going into the crater?" Yang Hao's eyes widened. He could not help but say, "Idiot, you can't withstand that temperature. Come back." The red skeleton suddenly stopped and gestured at the crowd, as if asking them to wait for it. After that, it walked towards the crater again. Yang Hao shook his head repeatedly. "Crazy! This guy is really crazy! I wonder which old bastard buried him here and even used volcanic magma as the foundation. He deserves to be robbed." The Patriarch of Hell looked at Yi Qin and said while rubbing his palms, "Fellow Yi, should we go and take a look?" Yi Chen watched as the red skeleton approached the crater. He smiled and said, "There's no rush. Let's wait a little longer." Following that, everyone fell into silence. All of them widened their eyes as they looked in the direction of the crater. After an unknown period of time, the silent night was suddenly broken by an angry voice. "Which bastard disturbed your grandfather's sleep?" "It's you again, little skeleton. You wait for Grandpa. Don't run." As a series of curses came from the crater, a red figure rushed out of the crater like the wind. It was the red skeleton from before. As he ran, he gestured at the crowd, as if reminding them to run quickly. In his hand was a volcanic Oregon. Immediately after, a red shadow also rushed over from behind. "Ga, Ga, Ga!" As the red skeleton ran toward Yi Chen and the rest, it closed its mouth and seemed to be rather proud of itself. In the end, it rushed into the crowd and hid behind Yan Hao in an extremely comical manner. It even used its two bony hands to hug Yan Hao's waist tightly from behind, as if it was afraid. Holy shit! Yan Hao was almost scared to death. He struggled with all his might. "Damn you! Hurry up and let me go. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. No, who knows if you were a man or a woman when you were alive? You might even be gay." The red figure that was chasing after it finally came to a halt when it was less than 100 feet away from the group. The red shadow was only the size of a palm, and its entire body was covered in golden lumps. It had 3 legs, and from afar it looked like a 3-legged toad that had been bathing in fire. The Patriarch of Hell was dumbfounded. "What's that? A 3-legged toad? Toad my ass! Your whole family is toads." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden toad immediately panicked as if it had been extremely humiliated. "My name is Skyfire Divine Toad, not a toad." The Patriarch of Hell's face was filled with disdain. "How dare you call yourself a Skyfire Divine Toad? Isn't it just 1 leg less than an ordinary toad?" TKU. The golden toad went berserk and cried out in anger. Then it leaped toward the Patriarch of Hell. "Aya, you're bullying the Patriarch? You won't know how powerful I am if I don't remove your 3 legs." The Patriarch of Hell exclaimed in surprise. Then he stretched out his hand and turned it into a huge hand that grabbed at the former from afar. Whoosh! However, to everyone's surprise, the Patriarch of Hell's hand missed. Immediately after, the golden toad leaped close to him and cursed. "I curse you to have pus on the soles of your feet and sores on the top of your head." Under everyone's horrified gazes, a big red sore suddenly appeared on the old ancestor's forehead. The Patriarch was stunned. The golden toad's saliva splattered. "I curse you to be hit by a meteorite while walking." Boom! At that moment, a colossal object suddenly descended from the sky like a huge mountain. Then it smashed toward the Patriarch of Hell. Bang! Yi Chen extended his hand and destroyed the Patriarch before he could attack. Then he slapped the golden toad. Roar! The golden toad could not dodge in time and suffered a heavy blow. It immediately cried out in pain and was sent flying, smashing through a mountain. Then everyone stared at the Patriarch of Hell, their gazes focused on the red sores on his forehead. Holy *T, what kind of technique is this? Yang Hao was dumbfounded. He subconsciously distanced himself from the Patriarch in disdain. The others also had goosebumps. At their cultivation base, a mere curse technique could not attack them. However, the Patriarch had fallen for it. None of them had seen such a strange technique before. Many people rejoiced when they thought of this. If they had been cursed by the golden toad earlier, they would probably have fallen for it too. Only Song Chia held back his laughter and looked at the Patriarch. "Patriarch, come. Take off your shoes, and let us see if there's any pus." The corners of the Patriarch of Hell's mouth twitched. "Get lost!" At the same time, he felt goosebumps. He was at soul formation stage, but he had fallen for a toad's curse. Losing face was a small matter, but getting rid of the sore was a big matter. Thinking to this point, he hurriedly reached out and rubbed the bumps on his forehead. To his horror, these bumps could not be removed at all. He said to Yi Chen while gritting his teeth, "Fellow Yi, capture that damn three-legged toad for me. I'm going to skin it." Interesting. Yi Chen smiled faintly. Subsequently, he could not help but look in the direction where the golden toad was sent flying. With his golden pupil-fiery eyes, he immediately saw the golden toad hiding in the mountain, revealing a pair of green pea-sized eyes that were staring at the crowd. Yi Chen looked at it with a faint smile. "Do you want me to invite you out? Or do you want to come out yourself?" End of this chapter. Chapter 1476. As soon as Yi Chen said that, the toad that was hiding in the huge mountain closed its eyes subconsciously and did not move. Clearly, it was trying its best to hide itself. It was extremely confident in its breath concealment technique. It had successfully tricked countless people with this technique. Even void refinement old monsters would not be able to discover it if they did not look for it on purpose. Yi Chen could not help but laugh when he saw that. "Let's talk. You should be able to feel that I have no ill intentions towards you. This damned three-legged toad. Let's see if I don't skin you alive." The Patriarch of Hell carried a few big bumps on his head and directly rushed towards the mountain where the toad was. At the same time, he activated his great divinity. Just as the Patriarch was about to break the mountain, the toad suddenly moved. After shaking a few times, it opened its mouth and spat at the Patriarch. Swoosh! Suddenly, a sword gleam slashed at the Patriarch. Clang! The Patriarch activated his divinity and collided with the sword. He could not help but take a few steps back. When he looked again, the sword gleam floating in the air was a flying sword that flickered with moonlight. The flying sword whistled and surged, and the sword gleam was brilliant. Divine spirit treasure. Someone could not help but exclaim when they saw that. Divine spirit treasures were almost top-notch among spirit treasures. Even perfected God transformation cultivators would only use divine spirit treasures. However, the toad in front of him spat out a divine spirit treasure? Seeing that the flying sword did not hurt the Patriarch, the toad was shocked and spat at the Patriarch again. Chirp! Under everyone's gazes, a red figure that looked like a vermilion bird let out a long cry and charged at the Patriarch of Hell with terrifying divine flames. Break for me! After the Patriarch of Hell used a sharp finger to disperse the red figure with all his might, what he saw was a red ribbon fluttering in the air. Another divine spirit treasure. This time, even the old ancestor was a little shocked. Even Yi Chen was surprised. A mere toad spat out 2 divine spirit treasures consecutively. Moreover, they did not acknowledge him as their master. Whoosh! Taking advantage of this gap, the toad leaped and shot toward the horizon at an incredible speed. Yang Hao hurriedly shouted, "Ancestor, that guy ran away!" Patriarch Yellow Spring was about to give chase. "Damn toad, where are you going?" At this moment, a bolt of lightning blasted over from the direction the toad was fleeing in, revealing a golden hammer bathed in lightning. F***CK. Another divine spiritual treasure. Old ancestor Yellow Spring couldn't help but curse out loud after being struck by lightning. This guy is so fat, he actually has so many divine spirit treasures. Yang Hao's eyes immediately turned red. "Uncle Yi, catch it. We must catch it. There must be other treasures in this guy's stomach. Fat sheep. A proper big fat sheep." Yi Chen looked in the direction where the toad escaped. He smiled lightly and teleported immediately. Less than 100 miles away from the crater of the volcano, the environment was damp and the croaking of frogs could be heard. Under the pale moonlight, one could see countless frogs lying in the depressions. Croak, croak, croak. Every toad moved its abdomen and let out croaks. The croaks rose and fell, covering a radius of a kilometer. At that moment, Yi Chen landed lightly above the depression. He lowered his head and looked down quietly. 2 divine flames burned in his eyes. After a while, he suddenly smiled and landed next to a small depression in the corner. In the depression that was less than 20 meters in front of him there were a dozen toads singing with incomparable joy. Every toad was almost identical in size and appearance. Croak, croak, croak! As Yi Chin, the outsider, suddenly barged in, the dozen or so toads jumped and fled in all directions like frightened rabbits. They seemed to be cursing. A four-legged toad was mixed in with the group of toads, pretending to be frightened as it hopped around unhurriedly. You're smart. You know how to hide in a group of toads and try to fool my senses. However, it's useless. Yi Chin stood in front of him and said, while chuckling softly, "Brother Toad, there's no need to do that in front of me, right?" Croak, croak, croak! However, the toad acted as if it did not hear him. Like the other toads, it continued to jump at a steady pace. "I've tried to persuade you again and again. Since you don't want to listen, don't blame me." Yi Chen's eyes were slightly cold. He extended his hand and cast the gravity tactic at the toad from afar. His attack seemed ordinary. If a perfected god, transformation stage cultivator were to face it, they would not be able to resist at all. However, to Yi Chen's surprise, the toad dodged his power in an extremely ingenious manner. Then it turned around and spat at him. Boom! In an instant, a terrifying bloody gleam shot out of its mouth. Subsequently, it turned into a surging river of blood that charged at Yi Chin. The river of blood seemed to be burning. It dyed the entire sky red as soon as it appeared, and it even melted the space within a radius of 3,000 meters. Even Yi Chin, who was prepared, was finally moved when he saw that the river of blood was a red spirit talisman. Drought Demon Blood Talisman! The so-called Drought Demon Blood Talisman was a type of spirit talisman. It was refined from the blood of a drought demon, and it could inherit 100% of a drought demon's power. Suppress! At the critical moment, Yi Chin shouted softly. Emperor Brush appeared in his hand, and he quickly wrote a word at the surging river of blood. Buzz! As soon as the word suppress was written, it immediately turned into an invisible cage that enveloped the river of blood, attacking a radius of 3,000 meters. The river of blood stopped. At its core, the spirit talisman that was burning with flames trembled violently a few times before it was finally frozen in the air. The toad was so shocked that its eyeballs almost popped out. Impossible! How can you control my drought demon blood talisman? In the next moment, a large hand suddenly appeared. It streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning, and then it grabbed him in its hand. The toad struggled and let out all sorts of ghostly howls. "Let go of Grandpa! Otherwise, Grandpa will call my big brother and second brother out to kill you in minutes." "Who are your big brother and second brother?" Yi Chin said while smiling. "My big brother swept through Su. No one dared to provoke him. Even that poor scholar from the demon god forest didn't dare to provoke him." The toad was extremely proud. "My second brother is the second brother of Su. He once killed his way into the forbidden zone and dyed it with blood. He can kill you with a single breath." "Is that so?" Yi Chen's eyes lit up. The former's 2 sentences revealed a lot of things. He exerted force with his arm as he thought to this point. His strength was enough to crush a great mountain. But the toad only roared loudly and wasn't injured at all. Chapter 1477. My big brother and second brother are on the way. Pretty boy, you're dead. My second brother won't even care about you when he's angry. The toad continued to roar. Yi Chin smiled lightly. A ball of divine fire suddenly bloomed in his hand, and he refined the toad on the spot. I suddenly feel like eating supper in the middle of the night. I don't have roasted frogs, but roasted toads should be fine. Ah! The toad really screamed this time because it realized that its skin was starting to burn under Yi Chen's divine fire. Do you surrender? Yi Chen asked. The toad's body emitted a golden glow. No, Grandpa doesn't surrender. Give me a few years, if you're capable. I'll definitely beat you up by then. Do I like medium rare or medium rare? Yi Chan held his head down and proceeded to refine it. Putting aside the fact that the toad was full of treasures, most importantly, it had revealed many secrets of Su. Yi Chen was curious about it. The toad was speechless. It did not know if it was an illusion, but it actually smelled like roasted frogs. The saddest thing was that it suddenly felt that the roasted frogs smelled quite fragrant. Thinking of this, it subconsciously swallowed its saliva and immediately admitted defeat. Gigolo, oh no, sir, I surrender, I surrender. Yi Chen then put away the divine fire and looked at it from head to toe. What exactly are you? You don't look like a toad. Your whole family are toads. The toad exploded and glared at him. My name is Heavenly Fire, Divine Toad. I'm destined to illuminate the heavens in the future and break through the entire world. At this point, it seemed to be a little indignant. If I wasn't born in that strange place, how could I have been cursed? How could I have been bullied by you? You were born in the Forbidden Zone. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. The toad coughed continuously as if it realized that it had said something wrong. It could not help but shake its beady eyes and lie. Did Grandpa say that? You must have heard wrongly. Yi Chen laughed secretly. He knew that it was unwilling to tell him, so he changed the topic immediately. Why are you in the crater? Could it be that you're the guardian spirit, beast of the ruins? Usually, before an expert died, they would be worried that someone would covet their tomb. So, they would set up some measures in advance. Traps and magic formations were a must, but they would also use spirit beasts to guard their tomb. Your whole family are caretakers of spirit beasts. The toad exploded once again. Its spittle flew everywhere as it said, that blockhead thinks he's worthy of Grandpa guarding his tomb? Grandpa is just going to swim in its lava. Is that all? Yi Chen smiled wryly. The toad couldn't help but feel diffident when it met his gaze. Of course, Grandpa also borrowed a few things from him. Whose tomb is that? Yi Chen asked again. The toad curled its lips and said unconcernedly, a martial god tomb. That blockhead was a martial god when he was alive. He has a hobby of collecting things from women's undergarments to the underpants of peerless experts. Yi Chen was speechless. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen returned from the crater of the volcano. What was different from before was that there was a toad on his shoulder. The toad was no longer as ferocious as before. All the lumps on its body were retracted. It was only the size of a palm, and it looked like a golden frog. The Patriarch of Hell immediately squeaked and went forward. Damn toad, you've finally fallen into my hands, haven't you? I'm going to roast you. The toad slanted its beady eyes and glanced at him in disdain. Don't you want the sores on your head and the pustules on the soles of your feet to go away? Bullsh *T. How can there be pustules on the soles of my feet? The Patriarch of Hell immediately revealed an awkward expression. And your hemorrhoids? The toad sneered as it squinted its eyes. As soon as he said that, Yang Hell laughed on the spot, and the others all looked as if they wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. I'm going to kill you. The corner of the Patriarch of Hell's lips twitched a few times. Then he pounced at the former with a ferocious glint in his eyes. All right. Yi Chen stopped him and said to the toad, remove the sores on his head and the pustules on the soles of his feet. Oh, and the hemorrhoids on his, but I don't have hemorrhoids. The Patriarch of Hell protested. The toad rolled its eyes and said, I have a condition. After entering the ruins later, I want a fire lotus deep in the magma. Yi Chen glanced at it coldly and immediately figured out its real purpose. This guy was going to take a bath, but in reality it was probably going for the fire lotus. Meeting his gaze, the toad immediately smiled bitterly and vomited at the Patriarch. Are you going to vomit another supreme spiritual treasure? The Patriarch of Hell could not help but be secretly delighted when he saw this. He was prepared to receive the fourth supreme spiritual treasure. The others held their breaths and were ready to snatch the supreme spiritual treasure at any time. Earlier, they only hated themselves for not reacting in time. How could they miss the opportunity before them now? However, in the next moment, the Patriarch felt a chill on his face. He could not help but reach out to touch it. He was stunned at first. and then he exploded. "Goddamn toad, how dare you spit at me? I was helping you get rid of your hemorrhoids." The toad was disdainful. Hearing that, the Patriarch of Hell could not help but reach out and touch his forehead. He realized that the huge sores from before had disappeared. He took off his boots and looked at his feet. He realized that the extremely itchy pustules were gone. At this moment, Yang Hao suddenly came over and said faintly, "Patriarch, do you want me to help you see if the hemorrhoids on your butt are still there? You bastard, get lost." The old ancestor almost couldn't help but slap him to death. Yi Qin glanced at the surging crater and said to everyone, "Everyone get ready. Let's go in and take a look. Big brother, we took a look earlier. This ruin has just appeared," Yi Wushuang said. Yi Wushuang said, "It seems to be because of the volcanic eruption. The terrifying energy destroyed the decaying formation, exposing the ruin." "This pretty boy is right." The toad agreed. This ruin was indeed revealed because of the volcanic eruption. Otherwise, it might have been buried underground for who knows how many years. "That's for the best." Yi Qin could not help but nod. If the ruin had really just appeared, it meant that no one had visited it, yet apart from the toad. As the second batch of people, they should be able to gain something. Meanwhile, the real reason why Yi Qin was going in was to find something that could extend Su Yuhan's life. Just when Yi Qin was about to urge everyone to enter the ruin, a few figures with terrifying auras suddenly shot over from the sky. Song Chie's expression changed slightly. "Someone's here." Chapter 1478. Zap, zap, zap. The sound of something tearing through the air could be heard from the distant horizon. Following that was a terrifying pressure. At first, there were only a few figures, but in the end, dozens of divine rainbows shot over. "Someone's coming." Before Song Chie could finish speaking, everyone had already sensed the scene. They all looked at the sky with solemn expressions. After the dozens of divine rainbows, there was a long dragon of murderous aura that blotted out the sky. It was as if thousands of horses were galloping. Rumble! The entire sky seemed to be shaking violently. The fog churned, beasts roared, and clouds evaporated. The leader was wearing a golden battle robe. Divine light surged from his body, and a supreme pressure swept across everything. His eyes were like lightning as he looked down at the volcano crater below. His pupils constricted as he said, "The martial god's tomb?" Whoosh! At that moment, the dozens of rainbows and the dragon of murderous aura behind him paused at the same time. Then they stopped in the air. The silent pressure was suffocating. Yi Chen's eyes flashed unnoticeably from below. Then his focus landed on the dragon of murderous aura that blotted out the sky. Mutated beasts. An army of mutated beasts. Every mutated beast was more than 150 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in barbs, and their bodies were ferocious. They roared with a strong murderous aura. On the backs of the mutated beasts sat a man wearing golden battle intent. The leader even held a golden war flag in his hand. He looked down on everything in the wind. 12 perfected god transformation stage cultivators. Someone behind Yi Qin could not help but inhale sharply. He seemed to be shocked by the other party's lineup. "Who are they?" Luo Tianya was worried. They were the first to discover the martial god's tomb. He did not expect it to be discovered so quickly. They're from the great Jiang god dynasty. At that moment, the toad on Yi Chen's shoulder suddenly said, "The great Jiang god dynasty is from the outer world." It said that there are almighties in the great Jiang god dynasty's mother planet who illuminates the heavens and enjoys the worship of all worlds. It seems like the one leading the team this time is the divine general of the great Jiang god dynasty, Jiang Yi. It said that he's the adopted son of the Jiang family. He's cruel and extremely loyal to the Jiang family. Everyone was shocked at first. Then they could not help but look at it. Clearly, they were curious as to how it knew so many secrets. The great Jiang god dynasty? Hearing this, Yi Chen's eyes could not help but flicker. Then his gaze shifted and finally landed on the golden-armored man called Jiang Yi. A man walked through the air and arrived beside Jiang Yi. "Sir Divine General, the martial god tomb has appeared here. In order to prevent the news from leaking, do we need to clean up the area within 1,000 miles radius?" At the end of his sentence, the person looked down at Yi Qin. His eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Hearing that, the people behind Yi Qin revealed cold expressions. Their eyes were filled with vigilance when they looked at the people of the great Jiang God dynasty again. Yi Wushuang looked at Yi Qin. "Brother, should we attack?" Yi God dynasty's attack. At the same time, Divine General Jiang Yi, who was in the air, only glanced at Yi Qin and the rest coldly. Then he looked in a certain direction, thoughtfully. It's too late. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold voice suddenly exploded in the sky. "Your great Jiang divine dynasty is really fast." Rumble. As soon as he said that, it was as if thousands of thunderbolts exploded at the same time. Then 18 giants suddenly descended. Each giant was like an ancient god, suppressing heaven and earth. The Panwu immortal sect. When the people of the great Jiang God dynasty saw the 18 giants, their pupils constricted, and they could not help but erupt with endless killing intent. 18 giants that were comparable to perfected God transformation stage. At this moment, even Patriarch Yellow Spring's expression froze. The toad on Yi Chen's shoulder chuckled. "The dogs of the Panwu immortal sect are here too. This is going to be fun. I wonder if their patriarch of Panwu is still alive." "You know people from the Panwu immortal sect?" Yang Hao could not help but ask. "Not only do we know each other, but we're also enemies." The toad chuckled. That old bastard, the patriarch of Panwu, wanted to subdue Grandpa. However, after Grandpa's second brother found out, he was beaten up by him. It glanced at Yi Chen intentionally after saying that. Everyone revealed doubtful expressions when they heard that. Yang Hao continued, "What's the strength of that patriarch of Panwu?" "He's very weak. He's only at the intermediate stage of void refinement," the toad said lazily. It then glanced at Yi Chen. Everyone gulped at the same time. "Gulp? Very weak, only at the intermediate stage of void refinement. Just yes, he was really weak. He was so weak that he could kill them with a single breath and destroy their souls." Yang Hao was shocked at first, but then he chuckled and said with a face full of disdain, "Toad, you're really a yawning toad." "What do you mean by yawning toad?" The toad was stunned. Yang Hao said, "Will you die if you don't brag?" Rumble. At this moment, the sky surged once more, and then countless figures descended one after another. Among these figures, there were both humans and various great demons. Apart from that, there were also all kinds of strange races. However, 8 figures caught Yi Chen's attention. The 8 of them were dressed in Taoist robes and looked to be in their 50s or 60s. However, the color of their clothes was different. "Brother Yi, they're from the Yan Huang Fortress." Luo Tiao walked to Yi Chen's side and took a good look at the 6 of them. He said quietly, "I'm afraid they're from the Shenyuan 8 clans." Just as he finished speaking, an old man in a black Taoist robe among the 8 figures seemed to have sensed his gaze and immediately looked over indifferently. With just a glance, Luo Tianya felt as if he was being targeted by a peerless, ferocious creature. He felt a chill run down his spine. Fortunately, the other party did not seem to recognize them. He only took a glance before retracting his gaze. In the void, as the old man in a black Taoist robe retracted his gaze, an old man in a green Taoist robe beside him immediately asked, "Brother Guquan, what's wrong?" The other 6 could not help but look over. The old man in a black Taoist robe called Guquan shook his head and said in a deep voice, "It's nothing. Everyone, we must obtain the martial god's tomb this time. If necessary, we can get old ghost Lei Yin to cross over." As soon as he said that, the other 7 people's expressions turned grave. If a void refinement old monster were to be mobilized, the battle would definitely escalate to an uncontrollable situation. At that moment, the entire sky above the volcano was filled with countless people. Each faction occupied a seat, and then they sized each other up with hostility. This was because everyone knew that the appearance of the martial god's tomb would definitely lead to an intense battle and competition. End of this chapter. Chapter 1479. Under everyone's gaze, a figure walked out from the Panwu immortal sect's camp. I didn't expect someone from the Yanhuang fortress to come as well. Everyone immediately looked over and saw that the person was dressed in a green robe. He looked middle-aged, but his long hair was alternating between black and white. Clearly, his age did not match his appearance. Panwu immortal sect leader, Su Yangzi, the toad on Yi Chen's shoulder, said. As if in response to Su Yangzi's words, an old man from the Shenyuan 8 clans stepped forward. Su Yangzi, if your Panwu immortal sect can come, why can't my Yanhuang fortress? The old man wore a Taiji Taoist robe and held a horsetail whisk in his hand. His entire body exuded an otherworldly aura, and his eyes were bright as if they could see through people's hearts. Who is this person? Yi Chen asked the toad. The toad curled its lips slightly. Who knows? Among the Shenyuan 8 clans, Grandpa only knows those old things who are about to die. As for this person, I think he's from the Ji family. Su Yangzi chuckled and said, teasingly, so its fellow Ji Hong, I heard that your Ji family's patriarch is about to die. Instead of staying by his side, you came here. If anything happens, the Ji family's old ghost won't be able to save you. Su Yangzi, there's no need for the patriarch to deal with you. Ji Hong snorted coldly, his face trembling. The surrounding people watched coldly from the sidelines. Both sides were at daggers drawn, as if they were used to this scene. Only a few people's eyes flickered, clearly thinking about the meaning behind Su Yangzi's words. Everyone's here. At that moment, Jiang Yi from the great Jiang dynasty slowly spoke, his voice shaking the surroundings. Since that's the case, let's fight for the martial god's body with our own abilities. Boom! He took a step towards the crater below, and the space collapsed. People of the great Jiang dynasty, follow me. Those who are unconvinced, feel free to fight. Kill. In an instant, the army of mutated beasts behind him swept through everything like a flood, rumbling as they followed Jiang Yi and ran towards the crater. The Panwu immortal sect will be the first to be unconvinced. Those who block me today will die. Su Yangzi was so angry that he laughed. He waved his hand, and the 18 giant figures behind him immediately stepped onto the ground, following closely with terrifying killing intent. Let's go too. Ji Hong glanced at the 7 people beside him. He deeply inhaled a breath of air and similarly flew towards the mouth of the volcano. Rumble! At that moment, the whole world was stirred up again. The other forces moved one after another. Even though the great Jiang divine dynasty and the Panwu immortal sect were strong, no one present was willing to back out, because the martial god's tomb was just too tempting. However, a great battle didn't erupt immediately because everyone's objective was still to search for treasures in the end. No one was willing to become the target of public criticism before they entered the martial god's tomb and completely witnessed the treasures within. Seeing that Yi Chen seemed to be in no hurry, the toad on Yi Chen's shoulder urged immediately, Brat, keep up. If you don't go in now, there'll be nothing left. Yi Chen, on the other hand, looked around thoughtfully. To his disappointment, he did not see anyone from Taichu Dojo. Otherwise, he wouldn't mind cleaning it up in advance. Go. Yi Chen took one last look at the empty crater of the volcano. In the end, he took a step out and charged in with everyone. As the initial guide, the red skeleton did not fall behind. Instead, it chose to follow the crowd as if there was something inside attracting it. As soon as they stepped into the mouth of the volcano, the first thing that hit them was an extremely scorching feeling. However, this kind of scorching heat was still acceptable to everyone. After all, they only needed to expend their quintessential essence to condense a layer of protective barrier around their bodies. The second thing that came into view was a boundless river of magma. It looked like a boiling soup that was spewing boiling hot magma out of it. One could vaguely see many corpses. At the end of the magma, there was an extremely ancient and decaying palace floating on it. The palace remained motionless in the face of the boiling magma. Yi Qin activated the golden pupil flame. He could vaguely see that there seemed to be an extremely dangerous and scorching flame in the depths of the magma. He could not help but ask the toad, "Is the thing you want down there?" "That's mine. None of you are allowed to snatch it." The toad spat out golden divine flames as if it was determined to obtain it. "In return, I can tell you some treasures that they can't find." "Is that so?" Yi Chen smiled lightly. "We'll talk about it when the time comes." Everyone immediately rushed toward the distant palace. As soon as they stepped into the palace, they saw that a thick and ancient stone door had long been shattered into pieces and scattered on the ground. There was still terrifying true origin energy lingering on it. Clearly, it was done by the people of the great Jiang God dynasty. Apart from that, there were many bloodstains on the ground. It looked very shocking. The Patriarch of Hell frowned. They were killed instantly. It seems like they didn't fight each other to death. Instead, they triggered some mechanism. Everyone could not help but feel nervous when they heard that. "Look at the two of you," the Patriarch of Hell said disdainfully. "Even if there are any formations or restrictions, they would have lost their effectiveness long ago if they were the vanguard for us. It's not that simple." Yi Chen lowered his head and picked up a trace of blood under his feet. He said, "This person was probably a stage soul formation, Cultivator, when he was alive, but he was killed instantly. From this, it can be seen that the danger here is more serious than we imagined. The martial god's tomb is naturally extremely dangerous," the toad said in disdain. "Otherwise, why do you think so many people would risk their lives to enter the martial god's tomb?" "Follow behind me." Yi Chen shook his head and stepped into the palace immediately. What he saw were 9 tunnels made of stone rooms. Each tunnel was so deep that he could not see the bottom, even though Yi Chen's divine consciousness could cover a wide range. He could not see to the bottom. "Which tunnel should we take?" Yang Hao asked. "The 5th tunnel." Before Yi Chen could speak, the toad on his shoulder suddenly said, "Brat, trust me. You guys will definitely benefit if you take the 5th tunnel." Yi Chen pondered for a while and then dashed into the 5th tunnel. Along the way, everyone saw many corpses lying on the ground. Clearly, someone had entered before them and fought. The tunnel was very long. Every 500 meters, there would be a separate stone room. It seemed to be the place where the owner of the tomb used to cultivate when he was alive. Unfortunately, the things inside had long been plundered. When everyone stepped into the last stone room, the first thing that greeted them was endless cold air. On the floor that was paved with cold jade, there were red medicinal pills piled up like a small mountain. The medicinal pills were refreshing. Due to the protection of the cold jade, they still retained their medicinal properties even after such a long time had passed. When Yi Chen's gaze landed on the medicinal pills, he could not help but be stunned even though he was calm. These dragon blood pills! End of this chapter. Chapter 1480. In the spacious stone room, the floor that was paved with 1,000-year-old cold jade was currently filled with piles of round pills. The pills were like blood-stained baby fists. They were crystal clear like jade and extremely plump. Within them, there was an extremely shocking body-refining power faintly seeping out. Even Yi Chen and the Patriarch of Hell were stunned by the scene before them. "There's so many dragon blood pills here!" The dragon blood pill was rumored to be refined from dragon blood. It was a body-refining pill. Every single pill could greatly temper the potential of a cultivator's body. It was extremely precious to martial artists, and it was no exception to cultivators. After all, a cultivator's weakness was their physical body. If they had the dragon blood pill, their physical body would be greatly enhanced. In the future, they would have enough capital to fight others. The dragon blood pill was usually difficult to find. However, it was piled up like a mountain here, and it was casually scattered on the ground by the owner of the cave. It had to be said that the owner of this tomb was truly generous. At that moment, Luo Tinya, the North Sea Hall master, and the rest were stunned. Their eyes were filled with greed as they looked at the medicinal pills before them. If they were not afraid of Yi Qin, there might really be people who could not help but take action. Only the toad said indifferently, "Isn't it just a pile of lousy medicinal pills?" Yi Qin saw everyone's gaze and said after pondering for a moment, "Everyone, I'll keep these medicinal pills for now. I'll distribute them to everyone after we leave this place." In reality, the pile of dragon blood pills before him was not very attractive to him. After all, his body had long exceeded the scope of everyone's understanding. It was useless even if he had it. "Heavenly Lord Yi, that makes sense." Everyone nodded. Clearly, they were not worried that Yi Chen would take it for himself. "All right then, I'll take them first." Yi Chen nodded and extended his hand. He then enveloped the many dragon blood pills with his divine consciousness and collected them quickly. Even with his majestic divine consciousness, he could not collect all the dragon blood pills before him in an instant. Tap, tap, tap. At that moment, the sound of rustling footsteps came from outside. Everyone's expression immediately became tense. In an instant, several figures appeared at the entrance of the stone room. However, their gazes were all focused on the mountainous pile of dragon blood pills, and their eyes were filled with greed. "Kid, hand over the pills you've taken and come out obediently. We might spare your life if you do that." The sinister old man in the lead looked at Yi Chen greedily. At the same time, the people behind him blocked the entrance of the stone chamber. Clearly, they did not plan to let Yi Chen and the rest leave. There were a total of 7 people. 3 of them were in the late soul transformation stage, while the rest were in the mid-soul transformation stage. In their opinion, although Yi Chen's camp had many people, there were less than 2 people who could threaten them. With so many dragon blood pills, it was enough for the 7 of them to use. There were still leftovers for their juniors, and they could even exchange them for spirit stones and magical treasures. "You're robbing me?" Yi Chen smiled lightly. Subsequently, he squinted and said, "Kill them all. Their things are yours." As soon as he finished speaking, countless auras exploded in the stone room, drowning the 7 of them in an instant. Soon, 7 broken corpses appeared on the ground. The sinister old man in the lead widened his eyes as if he had died with a grievance. He did not expect to encounter a tough guy like Yi Chen. At that moment, Yi Chen put away the last dragon blood pill. At that moment, people arrived one after another. However, when they saw the 7 corpses lying on the ground, their expressions could not help but freeze. They looked at Yi Chen with fear again. "That's the old man Tongshan." The old man Tongshan is a late-stage soul transformation stage patriarch after all, but he died here. It can only be said that wealth moves people's hearts. Who are they? Why have we never seen them before? The people who rushed over looked at Yi Chen and the rest and sent voice transmissions through divine consciousness. Although some of them could guess what benefits Yi Chen had obtained in the stone room, they did not dare to attack. After all, the fate of the 7 of them was right before their eyes. "Let's go!" Yi Chen glanced at everyone coldly and swaggered out of the stone room with the others. No one dared to stop him. He had always done things like this. It was best if everyone was safe. But if someone dared not open their eyes, then they could not blame him for killing them. "Toad, you really got it right." Yang Hao was extremely excited because of the dragon blood pill too earlier. He looked at the toad again and said, "Tell me, where are we going next?" "Head southeast. There's a treasure there." The toad rolled its eyes at the former's flattery. However, it still pointed out a path for everyone. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a thick stone door appeared in front of everyone. The stone door was already covered in green moss. The green color gave people a sense of age. Yang Hao tried to push it, but he felt that the stone door was extremely heavy. Then he turned around dejectedly and said, "The treasure is behind the stone door." That's right. If I'm not mistaken, behind the stone door is the herb garden cultivated by the owner of this tomb. The toad spat out divine fire. Her garden. Yi Chen's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He then took a step forward and scanned it with his divine consciousness. After confirming that there were no traps on it, he pushed hard. Rumble! The heavy stone door that was hundreds of meters tall and heavy was pushed by Yi Chen in an instant. The moment the stone door was pushed open, an extremely blinding light made everyone close their eyes by instinct. After adapting to the strong light, what entered everyone's eyes was not a herb garden, but a forest that seemed like an ancient forest. What followed was an extremely strong medicinal fragrance. Yang Hao suddenly looked at the toad and swallowed a mouthful of saliva in shock. This is the herb garden you were talking about? Isn't it a herb garden? The toad said in all seriousness. The expressions of the rest of the people were also extremely dull. How could their herb garden be so big? That was pure nonsense. How the F***CK was this a herb garden? It was clearly a sea of herbs. It could only be said that the owner of the martial god tomb was too rich. Rumble! Yi Chen closed the stone door with a backhand and said, "Let's go." The vast forest was shrouded in a faint layer of fog. A pungent fragrance drifted between heaven and earth. Occasionally, little beasts would flee in panic after being frightened by the crowd. It gave off a feeling of paradise on earth. At the same time, everyone spread their divine consciousness out one after another. Even Yi Chen was no exception. To his surprise, he could not cover the entire ancient forest with his powerful divine consciousness. The Patriarch of Hell reminded, "There are ferocious beasts inside. Everyone be careful." End of this chapter. Chapter 1481. In reality, there was no need for him to remind them. Everyone could sense that there would be great demons attacking from time to time in the dense forest. There were even ferocious beasts that were not inferior to Master Stage, God, Transformation Stage. Yi Chen walked at the front while everyone followed closely behind. They looked around vigilantly, guarding against the attacks of the ferocious beasts. However, what puzzled everyone was that the ferocious beasts they encountered along the way only glanced at them and did not stop at all. Song Chie said suspiciously, "Strange, why didn't they attack us?" Hearing those words, the crowd were all baffled. Only Yi Chen took a deep look at the toad on his shoulder. Subsequently, he could not help but reveal a thoughtful expression. "Essence gold fruit." At this moment, an early stage god transformation stage, Cultivator, suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked at a dazzling golden fruit the size of a baby's fist in the distant forest. His face was filled with joy. It really is the essence gold fruit. Someone seemed to be extremely surprised and said, "This item can be used to refine essence gold pills. It's perfect for cultivators with metal-type spiritual roots. It can increase one's perception of metal-type spiritual roots." Ha ha ha! I have a metal-type spiritual root. The former immediately laughed out loud. Then he walked over with a smile and carefully put it away before storing it in a jade box. Heavenly spirit fruit, silverhorn branch, congealed grass. As everyone went deeper, they saw many spiritual herbs. There was no lack of old ones among them. The Patriarch of Green Spirit walked to Yi Chen's side and could not help but say, "My lord, why don't we split up here for now? We'll each take what we need. If there's anything, just send a message." Yi Chen could not help but look at the rest when he heard that. He realized that everyone looked moved. Clearly, they agreed with the Patriarch of Green Spirit's words. That's good too. Remember not to be too alone. Yi Chen nodded and parted ways with the rest immediately. Only the Patriarch of Hell, Yi Wushuang, Luo Tianya, Yang Hao, and the rest followed him. These people are really short-sighted, the toad said disdainfully. They gave up on the real supreme medicine for some low-grade spiritual herbs. Upon hearing this, Yang Hao immediately became excited. Supreme great medicine? Even Yi Qin and the Patriarch of Hell could not help but look at him. At this moment, even the Patriarch of Hell realized how extraordinary the toad was. The toad said proudly, "Head east for 1,500 kilometers. How do you know that there's a supreme medicine 3,000 li to the east?" Yang Hao was puzzled. "Don't tell me you've been here before?" The toad curled its lips and said, "Believe it or not, it's up to you." Old Ancestor Netherworld snorted disdainfully and said, "Damn toad, if we don't see it when we get there, you'll be roasted and served to us tonight. You can still drink when you have hemorrhoids?" The toad sneered and retorted. Patriarch Yellow Spring was speechless. Just as they were talking, a dozen figures flitted over their heads, and they were running towards the east. "Someone has also broken in." Luo, Tianya frowned and said, "Looks like they've discovered that stone door as well." "Let's go and take a look." After pondering for a while, Yi Qin teleported with everyone. It would be best if they could find something that could extend Su Yuhan's life in the ancient forest. Half an hour later, Yi Qin arrived at the location that the toad had pointed out with the rest. It was a lake that was 3,000 meters in radius. The lake water was extremely clear, but from a cultivator's perspective, they could not see the bottom of it at a glance. The strangest thing was that a cultivator tried to cross the lake water, but he fell heavily into the lake water and turned into a skeleton. Deathly water. Yi Qin and the Patriarch Yellow Spring looked at each other. They saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. The so-called deathly still water looked no different from ordinary water, but in reality, even a drop of deathly still water could crush a building. The most terrifying thing was that any living thing that fell into the deathly still water would be corroded in an instant. The owner of this tomb is really generous. The Patriarch Yellow Spring clicked his tongue and said, "One must know that this thing is regarded as a treasure by the Deathly clan in the cultivation world. I think this person must have used this deathly water to temper his body." "What do you mean?" Yang Hao asked. The toad glanced at him disdainfully. "It means that the owner of this tomb used to take off his clothes and jump into the pond to bathe." Yang Hao's face turned pale when he heard that. Luo Tianya said, "There seems to be a small island in the middle of the lake." Yi Qin immediately enveloped the island in the middle of the lake with his divine consciousness. The scene that entered his eyes made his eyes light up. At the next moment, he took a step forward and actually dashed toward the lake. Luo Tianya could not react when he saw this sudden scene. What happened? Why is Brother Ye's reaction so huge? Fellow Yi has a calm temperament and rarely loses his composure like this. There must be something on the island that attracted him. The old ancestor of Hell's Spring's eyes flashed, and then he swept his sleeve and immediately carried Songchia and the others to follow. On the small island that was only 300 meters in radius, there were dozens of figures facing each other. The atmosphere was extremely cold. If there were outsiders present, they would definitely discover that these dozens of figures were Jiang Yi of the great Jiang God dynasty, the Panwu immortal sect master, Su Yangzi, and the rest. Invisible killing intent surged in the air, and blood dyed half the sky red. Master Su Yangzi quickly swallowed a pill, then looked at Jiang Yi, who was holding a golden halberd, with a pale face and said, "Surnamed Jiang, do you really want to fight to the death with me today?" Jiang Yi held the golden halberd in his hand. The golden armor on his body had long been shattered. His gaze was indifferent and firm as he said, "The great Jiang God dynasty is determined to obtain the soul-returning wood, no matter the price. The Xianyuan 8 clans are also determined to obtain the soul-returning wood." Ji Hong, who was in the surroundings, led the 7 of them and said indifferently, "If you know what's good for you, you should retreat immediately to avoid any casualties at the center of the island, not far away from them. there was an extremely strange-looking small tree. The small tree was only a foot tall, and its entire body was silvery gray in color. There was a faint soul energy fluctuation that was as vast as the sea on it. It was the culprit that caused everyone to fight. All of you are determined to obtain the soul-returning wood. Su Yongzi sneered, but there's only one soul-returning wood. We can't cut it into several pieces and then divide it equally, right? Hearing that, everyone's eyes turned cold and extremely terrifying. If the soul-returning wood was damaged, it would lose its effect. In that case, what was the difference between it and ordinary trees? At that moment, a faint voice exploded in everyone's minds. All of you don't have to fight anymore. I want this item. If you don't want to die, hurry up and scram. End of this chapter. Chapter 1482. All of you don't have to fight anymore. I'm taking this item. If you don't want to die, scram. Following this sudden voice, the originally chilly atmosphere in this place had become extremely chilly. The expressions of Jiang Yi of the great Jiang God dynasty, the Panwu immortal sect master Su Yongzi, and the rest turned completely cold at that moment. Especially the Panwu immortal sect master Su Yongzi. At that moment, intense killing intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. In his opinion, only the few forces in front of him could pose a threat today. Even so, neither side dared to say such arrogant and overbearing words. However, how could he not be furious when someone acted like this? In an instant, everyone, including Su Yongzi, looked coldly at the space behind them. The coldness in their eyes almost materialized. Under everyone's gazes, a young man in his 20s or 30s walked through the air with his hands behind his back. The young man landed lightly on the ground. His indifferent gaze was fixed on the soul-returning wood, as if he treated everyone as air. It was the young man's almost disregard that immediately infuriated everyone. If not for the fact that the other party's identity was unfamiliar, someone would have attacked long ago. It's you. Su Yongzi was shocked when he saw Yi Chen's face clearly. Clearly, he recognized Yi Chen whom he had seen outside the tomb. However, he did not pay much attention to a young man like Yi Chen back then. It's actually this brat. At the same time, the people from the Xianyuan 8 clans, led by Ji Hong, were also shocked. Ji Hong took a good look at Yi Chen and said with a faint smile, "Little friend, this item doesn't belong to you. It's not too late for you to retreat now." They did not rush over from the Yan Huang fortress, so they did not know that Yi Chen had forcefully broken through the Yan Huang fortress formation. "I didn't expect there to be a soul-returning wood here." Yi Chen stared at the small tree before him and said, "That's out of my expectations," seeing that he had repeatedly ignored them. Su Yongzi smiled sinisterly. "What an arrogant brat. I'd like to see where you get your qualifications from today." As he spoke, he had already taken a step toward Yi Chen. He grabbed at the air with his right hand, and a long sword flickered with lightning immediately appeared. "Brat, to be able to die under this old man's sword is your good fortune." Killing intent filled his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, the long sword in his hand turned into a sword gleam and charged at Yi Chen as if he wanted to tear him apart. Yi Chen glanced at him quietly and shook his head lightly. He extended his arm and pointed at the former from afar. In the next moment, the killing intent in Su Yongzi's eyes was immediately replaced by dense shock because he actually noticed that the sword in his hand seemed to have been frozen in place and was unable to move any further. What happened? Master Su Yongzi is at the great perfection of the soul formation stage and the leader of a sect. How can he not even take care of a junior? At the same time, the surrounding people also noticed that something was wrong. Bang! Before anyone could react, there was a loud bang, and the sword in Su Yongzi's hand exploded into countless pieces. Su Yongzi coughed out a mouthful of blood and retreated with a pale face. His eyes were filled with terror. "Who exactly are you? How is this possible?" At this moment, the expressions of the surrounding people changed drastically. shattering a flying sword that was a supreme spirit treasure with a single finger. Even Jiang Yi, from the great Jiang God dynasty's pupils constricted. He looked at Yi Chen with fear in his eyes again. I've already said that I've taken a fancy to this item. If you don't want to die, scram. Since you've attacked me, you should be killed. Yi Chen's eyes flashed. He extended his hand and grabbed a flying sword fragment. Then he pierced it at Su Yangzi. Oh no! At that moment, all the hair on Su Yangzi's body stood on end, and the aura of death suddenly surged into his heart. At the moment of life and death, Su Yangzi let out a loud cry. Suddenly, a golden bell surged out of his body. The bell surged with divine light, as if it was the toughest thing in the world. Panmu Bell? Ji Hong was shocked when he saw that. Jiang Yi of the great Jiang God dynasty frowned and said, No, it's just a rubbing of the Panmu Bell. The real Panmu Bell is with old geezer Panmu. Even so, there are still runes imprinted on the Panmu Bell. Those below the void refinement stage can't break it. Boom! Before he could finish speaking, he was drowned by the intense shock. What he saw was the Panmu Bell that everyone was afraid of being broken by Yi Chen with a single strike. Ah! Su Yangzi spat a mouthful of blood and cried out. He looked at Yi Chen in fear. Who exactly are you? He knew how powerful the rubbing of the Panmu Bell was. Those below the void refinement stage could not shake it. However, how could he believe that the young man before him was at the void refinement stage? Dead. People don't have the right to know my name. Yi Chen's expression remained the same as he said calmly. Hearing those words, Su Yangzi's gaze suddenly became a bit venomous. He threatened, Brat, even though I am no match for you, do you really think you can fight against all of us by yourself? Old geezer Su Yang is right. Gu Quan's gaze was cold as he said evasively, Young man, there are more than 40-stage soul formation cultivators here today. If we attack together, even if you have 3 heads and 6 arms, you will be defeated here. Fellow Gu Quan's words make sense. His words immediately received the approval of many people. Only Jiang Yi, from the great Jiang God dynasty, remained silent. Since that's the case, all of you can attack me together. Why should I be afraid? Yi Chen shook his head lightly. After saying that, he took a step forward and charged at Su Yangzi. How dare you, arrogant brat! Save the sect leader. Seeing that, the expressions of the 18 giants around them changed. Subsequently, they unleashed their cultivation base and attacked Yi Chen at the same time. Panwu Divine Fist. The leading giant's dazzling fist shadow was like an ancient god that created the heavens. It collapsed the void and suppressed heaven and earth. Invisible killing intent shook the surroundings. Surging true origin energy was like a vast ocean that wanted to destroy everything. No one can stop or save the person that I want to kill, Yi Chen said softly. His expression did not change as he lifted his palm gently. Boom! Following an earth-shattering boom, an invisible palm force blasted out. It carried terrifying true origin energy and landed on the giant. Ah, that person's chest caved in after suffering the heavy blow. After letting out a blood-curdling scream, he fell to the ground and died on the spot. Brother Void Flame, when the remaining 17 people saw this, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The shocking killing intent on their bodies surged, and the killing intent swept through the heavenly river. We have to kill this, Brett, no matter the price. We have to extract his soul, refine it, and grind his bones into ashes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1483. Someone, on the other hand, was terrified. Who exactly is he? Kill. The 17 giants attacked again. Various phenomena appeared on their bodies. Lightning surged, divine flames erupted, and lightning pierced through the sky. You're courting death. Yi Chen's eyes flashed. Dazzling divine flames suddenly bloomed from the edge of his palm. The scorching temperature melted the surrounding space directly. Destroy! He spat out a word softly, and his palm swept across the sky and pressed down. In an instant, a palm print that was around 300 meters in size descended from the sky with a terrifying whistling sound. Oh no! When Yi Chen's palm pressed down, the expressions of the 17 people from the Panwu immortal sect changed abruptly. Even the rest of the people turned pale. At that moment, they could clearly feel that Yi Chen's palm was like a void refinement powerhouse's attack. It could pierce through heaven and earth. Retreat, retreat now! Su Yangzi roared maniacally. The 17 of them used all their might and unleashed their most powerful escape technique to avoid Yi Chen's attack. Desperate struggle. Yi Chen scoffed coldly. His gaze was cold. That scoff was like a thunderclap that exploded in the air. It directly shattered all the rocks, earth, and trees within a radius of 3,000 meters. Panwu wall! At the critical moment, the 17 of them roared in unison. Layers of thick, cocoon-like things appeared on their enormous bodies at a speed visible to the naked eye. One of the spectators cried out in surprise. This is the Panwu immortal sect's physical ability, the Panwu wall. It said that when cultivated to mastery, one can pluck the stars and the moon, boom, under everyone's gaze. Yi Chen's palm that descended from the sky forcefully struck the 17 giants of the Panwu immortal sect. Thud! As a loud bang that sounded like a star smashing onto the ground rang out, the place where the 17 people of the Panwu immortal sect where it sank more than 30 meters deep. When the smoke and dust dispersed, everyone was dead silent. At that moment, there was not a single person in front of them. There was only a huge crater, and in the crater there were golden, purple, red, and other colorful fragments, as well as pungent blood and minced flesh. The 17 giants of the Panwu immortal sect that were comparable to perfected god transformation stage were slapped into blood and minced meat by Yi Chen. One palm, just one palm. Dead silence. The world suddenly fell into a dead silence. As the pungent smell of blood filled the air, someone finally shivered and was the first to wake up. Dead, dead, all dead! Gulp! Someone swallowed with great difficulty and forcibly repressed the shock and fear in his heart. Those are 17 deity transformation stage cultivators. However, no one responded to him. There was only shock and amazement like a stormy sea. He killed 17 perfected soul formation cultivators with a single palm strike. Didn't that mean that even if many of them at the great perfection of the soul formation stage were to encounter that palm, they would suffer the same fate? Su Yangzi, the only survivor, stared blankly at this scene. He murmured in horror, "How is this possible? How is this possible?" Suddenly, his body trembled violently. He seemed to have recalled something as he looked at Yi Chen with a trembling gaze. Void refinement, old monster. Why, you're a void refinement, old monster! As soon as these words were spoken, everyone felt their scalps go numb as if they'd been struck by lightning, and they were practically unable to stand firmly. Jiang Yi, from the great Jiang god dynasty, also sucked in a breath of cold air. Void refinement, old monster. The person standing before them was actually a void refinement, old monster. However, Yi Chen's face was just too young. It was hard for them to believe. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? Yi Chen clenched his fingers into a fist lightly. Vast divine light shone from his fist. Subsequently, he threw a punch at Su Yangzi. Senior! At that moment, Su Yangzi was horrified. He could not help but say, "Senior, I'm willing to back out. I'm willing to back out. My Panwu immortal sect also has a void refinement cultivator. It's too late." Yi Chen shook his head lightly. The momentum of his punch did not decrease. As Su Yangzi retreated, he could not help but hammer his chest heavily. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood essence and quickly used it to form a formation in the air. Buzz! At that moment, a tall old man who seemed to be a divine shadow suddenly condensed in the air and shouted like thunder, "Stop!" That person seemed to have been projected from an extremely distant place. Could it be the Patriarch of Panwu? At that moment, Jihong and the rest could not help but stare fixedly at the tall old man who had suddenly appeared in the air. It should be him. However, rumor has it that the old man was injured a few days ago and has been in closed-door cultivation for a long time. Jiang Yi, from the great Jiang God dynasty, secretly frowned. In the Xianyuan 8 clans camp, Gu Quan's eyes were filled with resentment. The old man's projection should be able to kill this brat. However, Yi Chen acted as if he did not see that reprimand. Bam! As the sound of bones being pierced rang out, Su Yangzi's eyes glazed over, and blood spurted out from his entire body. Then he fell heavily to the ground, and his body collapsed on the spot. His mudball palace was destroyed along with his primordial spirit. No one expected that in less than a few breaths of time, Su Yangzi, the sect master of the Panwu immortal sect, who was at peak soul formation stage, would be killed. Who exactly is this brat? At that moment, Jihong, Jiang Yi, and the rest looked at Yi Chen. Their faces twitched slightly. The tall old man in the divine consciousness shadow's voice was mighty and furious. How dare you kill a member of the Panwu immortal sect? Who are you? Old man, do you still recognize me? The toad on Yi Chen's shoulder suddenly jumped up and shouted, "This guy is Grandpa's new lackey. He's here to avenge Grandpa." Yi Chen could not help but glance at it when he heard that. "So it's you?" The tall old man in the divine consciousness shadow narrowed his eyes. His expression was dignified, as if he was about to flare up. However, the fluctuations distorted a few times before he disappeared on the spot. "Brat, don't be afraid." The toad shook its head reluctantly. It turned around and said to Yi Chen, "This old man is just a projection. Moreover, his actual body is injured. He won't dare to jump out and take revenge on you at this time." "I'm your new lackey?" Yi Chen's eyes flickered. The toad could not help but shiver when it met his gaze. It smiled bitterly immediately. It was a slip of the tongue, Yi Chen then looked around coldly. Many people took a step back, subconsciously, wherever his gaze landed. The toad jumped up and down on his shoulder, looking like a villain. "Scram, or I'll kill all of you!" Whoosh! As soon as it finished speaking, many people immediately rushed into the distance. Clearly, the deaths of Su Yangzi and the rest had greatly shocked them. At the same time, a streak of light shot over from afar, revealing the faces of the Patriarch of Hell and the rest. "Fellow Yi, we can't let them escape just like that. You must hand over the storage magic treasures." End of this chapter. Chapter 1484. No one is allowed to leave unless you hand over everything valuable on your body. The Patriarch of Hell and Yi Wushuang looked at each other. With a flash, they blocked many people who were about to leave with a murderous aura. This sudden scene caused everyone to be shocked. Yi Chen was slightly stunned. He shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Just when he was about to speak, he saw a powerhouse who was stopped sneering. "You, a mere early-stage god transformation stage, dare to do this?" Hearing that, the rest sneered. With their eyesight, they could naturally tell that the Patriarch of Hell and Yi Wushuang were only early-stage god transformation stage cultivators. There was no lack of late-stage god transformation stage cultivators among them. They were afraid of Yi Chen, but they were not afraid of a few mere early-stage god transformation stage cultivators. "Is that so?" The Patriarch of Hell suddenly grinned. At the next moment, the person who spoke earlier only felt his vision blur. Then he let out a blood-curdling scream and turned into a bloody mist that filled the air. Even his soul was not spared. Seeing this scene, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly froze. Many people looked at the Patriarch of Hell in disbelief. The latter was only at early-stage God transformation stage. Yet he killed a mid-stage God transformation stage cultivator instantly. How could they believe it? Under everyone's gazes, the Patriarch of Hell flicked his sleeves and smiled nonchalantly. If you don't hand over everything valuable on your body today, don't even think about leaving. At this moment, his unruly smile caused everyone's hair to stand on end. With Yi Chen's support, Yang Hao could not help but roar with pride. The Patriarch is right. If you want to leave alive today, you must hand over your most valuable items. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you. Luo Tianya and Song Chia could not help but laugh bitterly, hearing that the late-stage God transformation stage powerhouses' eyes turned cold and killing intent seemed to surge within them. However, they then glanced at Yi Chen, who was next to him secretly. His killing intent could only dissipate. He raised his hand and tossed an item to the Patriarch of Hell from afar. He said with a grim expression, "This is my storage ring." With that, he was about to shoot away. However, the Patriarch of Hell suddenly said, "Wait, take off your supreme spirit treasure, dragon-shaped belt too." Be asterisk starred. The former flew into a rage. Don't go too far. These people didn't even want to let go of his belt. They were too ruthless. He had risked his life to obtain this belt from a relic. "Kid, kill him." The toad jumped up and down on Yi Chen's right shoulder. Yi Chen's eyes flashed, and he was about to attack. The man seemed to have sensed the killing intent. He took off his belt without saying anything and tossed it to the Patriarch of Hell. He wanted to cry but had no tears. "Can I leave now?" "Get lost." Patriarch Yellow Spring's divine sense seeped into the storage ring. Then he said with a dark expression, "You're a late divine transformation realm cultivator. I didn't expect you to be so poor. Get lost. If I were you, I'd just buy a piece of tofu and kill myself." The corners of that person's mouth twitched fiercely, but he didn't dare to flare up in the end. He could only snort coldly and urge his figure to flash towards the horizon. Old Ancestor Yellow Spring looked at the crowd again and said, "All of you have seen it. Someone handed over the most valuable thing on him. We kept our promise and let him go. Now it's your turn." Some of the people who were squeezed together were initially unwilling. However, when they saw that someone had handed over their storage rings, they could not help but compromise obediently. Swoosh, 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 in an instant, dozens of storage rings shot toward the Patriarch of Hell. The Patriarch of Hell was so happy that he could not close his mouth. He could not even count them. Yang Hao's eyes were red with envy. He could not help but shamelessly go forward and smile. "Patriarch, do you want me to help you count them?" "Little bastard, get lost. When I was extorting you, your ancestors were still playing with pea and mud." The Patriarch of Hell kicked him directly. In less than half an hour, the people at the scene handed over their storage rings, one after another. Most of them had left, leaving only the people from the 8 Xianyuan clans and the great Jiang God dynasty. The Patriarch of Hell looked at them with a smile. "Guys, they've all left. It's your turn now. What do you think?" Ji Hong and the rest of the people from the 8 Xianyuan clans had extremely ugly expressions. At that moment, Jiang Yi, from the great Jiang dynasty, took a step forward. He cupped his fists at Yi Chen and said, "Senior, I'm Jiang Yi from the great Jiang God dynasty. For the sake of the great Jiang God dynasty, how much is the great Jiang God dynasty's reputation worth?" Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted impatiently by the Patriarch of Hell. "No one's reputation matters today. Either hand over your storage rings or leave your lives behind. How dare you be so rude to the great Jiang God dynasty?" A man in golden battle intent behind Jiang Yi immediately berated. Yi Chen waved his sleeve. All the people from the great Jiang God dynasty, including Jiang Yi, fell backward uncontrollably. "Hand over your storage rings, and you can leave." Hearing that, Jiang Yi could only take the lead to take off the storage rings on his hand with a livid expression. He then threw them at the Patriarch of Hell and left without looking back. "We're letting them go just like that?" Yang Hao stared blankly at the dazzling golden battlesuits on Jiang Yi and the rest. He was a little indignant. "We should have let them take off their clothes before letting them go. Those clothes look so cool. If we get tens of thousands of them and bring them back to Earth, we'll definitely be able to create a god of war." As soon as he said that, Yi Qin and the Patriarch of Hell looked at him with a strange expression. He scratched his head uncomfortably and said while smiling, "Uncle Yi, why are you guys looking at me? You're really AF * King Genius." The Patriarch of Hell looked at him in admiration. "You're ruthless and shameless. I like it. You're suitable to live in the cruel cultivation world." After hearing the word Earth, Jihong's eyes lit up, and he said with a smile, "All of you are from Earth?" The other 7 looked at Yi Qin and the rest as soon as they heard that. "So what if we're from Earth?" Before Yi Qin could speak, the Patriarch of Hell spoke first. "Don't even think about trying to get close to us. We still have to go through the necessary procedures." Necessary procedures? Jihong and the rest could not help but feel their temples throbbing when they heard that. They were almost fuming with anger. In the end, it was Jihong who forced a smile and said, "Judging from your skin color and appearance, you must be Chinese. To be honest, the 7 of us are also Chinese. I hope you can give us some face, since we're from the same country." That's right. We're all Chinese, so we shouldn't fight against each other. Instead, we should stick together and help each other, Gu Quan, who was next to him, said with a smile. As soon as he said that, the eyes of the other 6 lit up. They did not know that there was a void refinement old monster in China, Yi Qin. If they could get him over, it would be a great help to their forces. Gu Quan cupped his fists at Yi Qin and said enthusiastically, "Senior, I'm Gu Quan from the Gu family, one of the 8 Xianyuan clans in China." End of this chapter. Chapter 1485. At this point, he could not help but add proudly, "To be honest, my Gu family also has a void refinement patriarch." After saying that, he looked at Yi Qin proudly, trying to see a hint of surprise on their faces. However, he realized that Yi Qin and the rest's expressions were gradually turning cold. There was a meaningful look in their eyes as they looked at him. "You said that you're from the Gu family?" The Patriarch of Hell rubbed his chin and looked at him with a faint smile. "Of course." Gu Quan secretly frowned. He thought that they did not believe him, so he could not help but say, "My Gu family is known as one of the 8 Xianyuan families. I believe no one dares to pretend to be from my Gu family." "Very good." The Patriarch of Hell said something that he did not understand. He suddenly asked, "Do you know Gu Xian and Gu Qing?" "Of course I do. Gu Xian is a member of the younger generation of my Gu family, and Gu Qing is my younger brother," Gu Quan said with a smile. Gu Quan said with a smile. Then he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly looked at old Ancestor Hell. "Fellow Taoist, could it be that you know my younger brother?" Even Jihong and the rest could not help but look over. "We don't just know each other." The Patriarch of Hell grinned, revealing his white teeth. "Both Gu Xian and Gu Qing died in our hands." Gu Quan's expression froze. He thought that he had heard wrongly. He looked at the Patriarch of Hell coldly and said, "My younger brother is in charge of the Yan Huang fortress. How could he die?" The Patriarch of Hell smiled coldly. "Of course, we broke the formation of the Yan Huang fortress and rushed in to kill your younger brother." As soon as he said that, the scene suddenly fell into dead silence. Gu Quan flew into a rage. ****, what did you say?" Even Jihong's expression changed. "Fellow Taoist, you can't speak carelessly. Otherwise, you'll bring great trouble to all of you." At that moment, Yi Qin, who had been silent all this while, looked at Gu Quan quietly. "Your Gu family sent Gu Xian to ambush me with a female corpse, and Gu Qing rejected me from entering the Yan Huang fortress." I'm really fated with your Gu family. You! Gu Quan's body trembled violently. He stared at Yi Qin as if he had discovered something unbelievable. Why, you're mad southerny? As soon as these words were spoken, the entire place instantly fell silent. Ji Hong and the rest were stunned at first. Then they seemed to have recalled something. They could not help but look at Yi Chun in disbelief. Mad Southern Yi? They had also heard of the name Mad Southern Yi before. However, to the 8 Xianyuan clans that had come into being when Earth had fallen into the great calamity of the outer world, those 3 words were just an at. Who would have thought that Mad Southern Yi, whom they had always ignored, actually possessed the strength to kill most of the powerhouses of the Panwu immortal sect instantly? Surprised, right? Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chun smiled lightly. He looked at Gu Quan and said, Don't worry, I won't kill you today. I want you to go back and tell the Gu family that I will personally take revenge for everything that your Gu family has done to me. As for the other 7 races, at this point he could not help but fix his gaze on Ji Hong's group of 7. If the 7 of you want to stand on the Gu family's side and attack me, feel free to do so. Get lost. With that, he waved his sleeve and immediately unleashed a terrifying force, forcefully sending Ji Hong, Gu Quan, and the rest flying. Looking at the figures of the 8 Xianyuan clans disappearing into the horizon, the Patriarch of Hell rubbed his chin and said unhappily, Fellow Yi, you've ruined the process. The 8 Xianyuan clans are getting fatter and fatter. If we let them go just like that, it'll be a huge loss. They're Chinese after all. How can they be compared to the enemies from the outer world? Yi Qin nodded lightly and said, Moreover, I don't think Ji Hong and the rest of the 7 clans have any enmity towards me. If I embarrass them like this, it'll be hard for me to explain to fellow Bai Yan and the higher-ups in the future. That's good too. The Patriarch could only nod. Yi Qin turned around slowly and looked at the strange little tree that looked like a baby's smiling face not far behind him. This trip wasn't in vain after I obtained this. So, resurrection wood? The Patriarch of Hell's expression changed as well. It said that this item can bring the dead back to life. No wonder, fellow, you lost his composure earlier. It can bring people back to life? Yang Hao was shocked as well. Then he could not help but say, Uncle Yi, doesn't that mean that if anything happens to Aunt Yuhan, this soul resurrection wood can... If anything happens to Yuhan, this item can only protect her soul from dissipating, but it can't regenerate flesh and bones. After all, her body is almost rotten. Yi Qin shook his head lightly. Subsequently, he put away the soul resurrection wood and transplanted it into the divine hall between his brows to nurture it. The Patriarch of Hell sighed softly and comforted. It's not bad that you can protect your soul. After all, as long as your soul doesn't dissipate, the next step is to reforge your body. Yi Qin shook his head and said, Let's go! Just as everyone was about to leave, Yang Hao suddenly exclaimed, By the way, where's that red skeleton? Everyone immediately looked around and realized that the red skeleton that had been following them earlier had really disappeared. No one had noticed when it had disappeared. Grandpa knows where it went. The toad smiled meaningfully and said, So this cunning skeleton is here for that thing. In the middle of the tomb stood a majestic hall. This hall was copper yellow in color. After countless years, it had caused the hall to appear even deeper and more ancient. Traces of time could be seen on every single stone slab on the ground. The hall was extremely wide. If a person stood in it, they would not be able to see the end of it at a glance. In the middle of the hall, there were 10 giant bronze coffins floating in the air. Among the 10 giant green coffins, 9 of them formed a circle around each other, guarding the blood-red coffin at the top, as if the latter was the master. Dead silence, desolation, and awe-inspiring aura emanated from the blood-red coffin, as if there was a peerless murderer buried inside. Right at this moment, a rustling sound suddenly rang out in the originally dead silent hall, as if someone was walking over. If one took a closer look, they would discover that there was a red, humanoid skeleton walking over stealthily less than 300 meters away from the 10 giant green coffins. That's right, it was stealthily, as if every step it took was extremely careful. It was like a living person doing something guilty. Crack, crack, crack. The red humanoid skeleton would stop and look around with every step it took. As the red soul fire between its brows surged, it continued to walk toward the 10 giant green coffins. A moment later, it stretched its stiff limbs and leaped forcefully. It immediately jumped into one of the giant bronze coffins. With the help of this force, it finally landed on the blood-red coffin that was guarded. Creak, creak, creak. The red, humanoid skeleton pressed the lid of the coffin and opened and closed its mouth. The red soul fire between its brows suddenly surged, as if it was excited. End of this chapter. Chapter 1486. Thud, thud, thud in the quiet and decaying hall. A red human-shaped skeleton extended its bone claws and placed them on the lid of a blood-red bronze coffin. It seemed to be using all its strength to pry open the coffin lid. Gotcha! However, the coffin lid and the bronze coffin seemed to be stuck tightly together. No matter how hard it tried, it could not move the coffin lid at all. Instead, one of its bones broke. Seeing that, the red human-shaped skeleton jumped up and down anxiously, as if there was something extremely tempting in the coffin. Thud, thud, thud. At that moment, footsteps slowly came from the other end of the hall. In an instant, the red, human-shaped skeleton turned around abruptly. It turned its pair of white and sunken bone eyes and looked straight at the source of the sound. The red flame between its brows faintly emitted a terrifying aura. The Patriarch of Hell, who was less than 3,000 meters away from the main hall, said as he walked, "Damn Toad, are you sure that skeleton is here?" "Grandpa is sure that it's here." The toad on Yi Chen's shoulder glanced at the Patriarch in disdain. That silly skeleton must have taken a fancy to the soul fire of the martial god's body. It wants to absorb it to transform itself. Yi Chen, Yi Wushuang, and the rest secretly shook their heads when they saw the man and beast arguing nonstop. The man and beast had been bickering since they came here. Yang Hao suddenly pointed. "It's over there!" Everyone looked in the direction of his finger, and they immediately saw that there was a red, human-shaped skeleton staring at them from 1,000 feet away. The blazing soul fire between the red, human-shaped skeleton's brows gradually returned to normal when it saw that it was Yi Qin and the rest. It seemed to have put away its hostility. When everyone approached, they noticed the 10 bronze coffins in the middle of the hall. Song Chia cast a fireball to illuminate the surroundings. "Why are there 10 coffins here?" Luo Tianya was shocked at first. Then he seemed to have thought of something and could not help but say, "Could it be that this is the main tomb, and the master of the tomb is buried here?" Yang Hao was a little nervous as soon as he finished speaking. Ever since he entered the tomb, everything he had seen and heard along the way had made him respect and fear the master of the tomb. Now that he was in front of the coffin, he was really afraid that the other party would suddenly jump out and attack everyone. 9 coffins encirclement. Old ancestor Yellow Spring's unruly expression disappeared. He stared at the 10 bronze coffins and said, 9 is the highest. This person must have been a supreme figure when he was alive. No. However, Yi Qin denied what he said. He looked at the 10 giant coffins and said, "This should be the soul suppressing formation. Each of the 10 coffins is used to suppress a person's soul." Patriarch Yellow Spring's expression turned slightly solemn. "Are you saying that the person who created this formation refused to reincarnate and wanted to prevent his soul from dissipating in exchange for a chance at eternal life? It's also possible that the other party was suppressed here by his enemies, causing him to be unable to transcend forever," Yi Qin said. Even the old ancestor could not help but gasp. If that's the case, then this method is too cruel and vicious. After saying that, he walked around the 10 coffins and examined them. Finally, he said to Yi Qin, All 10 coffins have formations that seal souls. It seems like you've guessed correctly, fellow Yi. Could it be that the person being suppressed is the master of this tomb? San Chie's expression changed slightly as he said, "The master of the tomb is a martial god, an existence that has reached the peak of the martial Tao. There's actually someone who can suppress him here." As soon as he said that, everyone realized the problem. Yang Hao said, "Toad, you know ain't you the best. Tell me, who exactly is suppressing a martial god here?" "I don't know either." The toad pondered for a moment and said seriously for the first time, "I was born in the forbidden land of Inshu. I'm haunted by the curse of the forbidden land, so I can't remember things from too long ago." At this moment, the red human-shaped skeleton suddenly pointed at the bronze statue that was being guarded by the mouth and started to dance with joy. Yang Hao now had some understanding of the former's actions and language, so he explained to everyone, "This silly skeleton wants us to help him open that blood-red bronze coffin." "The coffin can't be opened." Luo Tianya was the first to object. "This is the resting place of a senior. We're already disturbing him by barging in. If we forcefully open the coffin, it'll be disrespectful to him." "Are you stupid, brat?" The Patriarch of Hell glanced at him in disappointment. "I've already told you that the master of this tomb is suppressed here. If we open the coffin lid, we'll be saving him instead. If he's in heaven, he'll be grateful to us." As soon as he said that, the red humanoid skeleton nodded immediately as if it understood what the Patriarch said. Moreover, it agreed with him. "Wait, something's not right," Yang Hao suddenly said. "Look at this blood-red bronze coffin. Why are there so many moths on it? Is it moldy?" "It's green hair." What Yi Chen said made him shudder. Clearly, the existence in this coffin has turned into a zombie. Once we open it, we might encounter a martial god's body that has turned into a zombie. "What? Turned into a zombie?" Yang Hao's face turned pale as soon as he said that. He leaped far away, like a rabbit whose tail had been stepped on, staying far away from the blood-red bronze coffin. "Why is it this thing again?" he gulped, and said to Yi Chen and the Patriarch of Hell with great difficulty, "Uncle Yi, why don't we go back? I'm afraid of this thing the most." "Look at you. You're much more cowardly than your father." The Patriarch of Hell glanced at him in disdain before turning his head to the toad and saying, "How powerful is a martial god exactly?" Everyone looked at the toad immediately. Even though they were in the martial god's tomb now, they still did not know much about martial gods. The only thing they knew was that so many forces were mobilized for this martial god's tomb. Martial god is a title for ancient martial artists on Earth. It's not a realm. Having the title of martial god means that one has reached the peak of the martial Tao. The toad said with a solemn expression, "If we must use realms to measure them, then the martial god realm is comparable to the void training realm. To be more precise, the martial god realm is unrivaled in the void training realm. Their strength alone is enough to break through all techniques. They can even traverse the vast, ancient starry sky with their physical bodies." As soon as he said that, the Patriarch of Hell's face twitched slightly. Clearly, he was shocked. He could not help but gulp and look at Yi Chen as he said, "Fellow Yi, you're the most powerful among us. Do you want to open it or not?" Yi Chen looked at the blood-red bronze coffin before him as he met everyone's gaze. Just when he was about to speak, he suddenly turned around and looked behind him. In the dead silent hall, 2 auras suddenly rushed over and landed in front of everyone in the blink of an eye. End of this chapter. Chapter 1487. The 2 figures were a man and a woman. The leading woman was about 23 or 24 years old. She wore a bright red dress and had a graceful figure. Her black, gem-like eyes were filled with intelligence. The man behind her was a gray-robed old man with a walking stick in his hand. His face was extremely old, as if he was on the verge of death. However, his turbid eyes were shining brightly. Yi Chen's gaze was fixed on the gray-robed old man. Even though the latter did not have any aura on him, Yi Qin could still feel a hint of deterrence from him. Void refinement. The Patriarch of Hell narrowed his eyes and secretly sent a voice transmission through divine consciousness. Fellow Yi, I'm afraid these two people aren't ordinary. Yi Qin nodded calmly. The lady in red glanced at Yi Qin and the rest coldly. Subsequently, she fixed her gaze on the blood-red bronze coffin. She said without turning her head, Elder Ku, is this the place? Hearing that, the gray-robed old man behind her nodded respectfully. Young mistress, this is the tomb of the War-Sky Martial God. War-Sky Martial God. Yi Qin and the rest also learned the name of the tomb master. What surprised Yi Qin the most was that the void refinement old monster actually addressed the lady in red as young mistress. Clearly, the latter's background verified the Patriarch of Hell's guess. The lady in red nodded slightly. Then, under everyone's gaze, she took a step forward and walked toward the blood-red coffin. Clearly, she was going to open it. At that moment, a lazy voice rang out. Little girl, we saw this place first. The lady in red stopped in her tracks and turned to look at the Patriarch of Hell. She said blankly, just because you saw it first, does it mean it's yours? Even the gray-robed old man who was initially kind narrowed his eyes and sized up Hell. When his gaze landed on Yi Qin, he was stunned at first. Then, a hint of surprise flashed through the depths of his turbid eyes. The Patriarch of Hell smirked coldly and said, Whatever the Patriarch sees is definitely the Patriarch's. No one can take it from him. Whoever does will die. Is that so? The woman in red was surprised. Just as she was about to lose her temper, she saw the old man's lips move slightly as if he was communicating with his divine sense. A moment later, the lady in red's expression changed slightly. She looked at Yi Qin in bewilderment. I'm Fong Ziyue from the Heaven Origin Trade Association. May I know how to address you, Senior? Yi Qin. Yi Qin smiled lightly. It's Senior Yi. Fong Ziyue smiled and said slowly, To be honest, I'm only here for one of the items in the coffin of the heaven-battling martial god. As for the rest, I won't compete with you for it. How do you know that we're willing to give you what you want? Patriarch Yellow Spring had a faint smile on his face. Hearing those words, Fong Ziyue frowned slightly. In the end, she said, This item is not a precious treasure. It is useless to you all. In order to express my apology, I am willing to give Senior 1,000,000 spirit stones as compensation. She lifted her hand slightly after saying that, and a storage ring shot at Yi Qin immediately. There are 500,000 spirit stones in there. Consider it my sincerity. The Patriarch Yellow Spring caught it quickly. He scanned it with his divine consciousness and nodded lightly at Yi Qin. Everyone was shocked to see that. She was giving away 1,000,000 spirit stones right off the bat. What a generous offer. Sensing her sincerity, Yi Qin said calmly, If the item that you guys want is useless to us after we open the coffin, I'll give it to you guys. Thank you. Fong Ziyue smiled and walked to the blood-red coffin immediately. She extended her slender hand and performed a strange seal. She then slapped the coffin lid hard. Just when her hand was about to touch the coffin lid, the green hair that covered the coffin lid suddenly expanded. It then turned into countless sharp needles that pierced her palm hard. Fong Ziyue was startled by the sharp pain that came from her palm. She immediately lowered her head to look at her palm, only to discover that there was quite a lot of blood flowing out from her palm. A few drops even fell on the lid of the blood-red bronze coffin. Almost within the blink of an eye, the blood on the coffin lid disappeared as if it had been absorbed by the coffin lid. Are you all right, young mistress? Upon seeing that, the gray-robed old man behind her took a step forward. Fong Ziyue endured the pain and frowned at the coffin lid that was covered in green hair. She said, Old Ku, my hand was pierced by the corpse hair. The gray-robed old man's expression changed drastically when he heard that. His young mistress had been practicing martial Tao and cultivation since she was young. She was a dual cultivator of spells and martial arts. Her body had long reached the level of a treasure, yet she was pierced by a mere corpse hair. While the two of them were talking, Yi Chen's gaze was fixed on the coffin lid. Unknowingly, he sensed that after the coffin lid absorbed the blood, there was a terrifying power coming from it. "Retreat now!" Thinking to this point, he suddenly shouted a reminder. Boom! Almost as soon as he finished speaking, the blood-red bronze coffin that was initially motionless like a dead object suddenly shook violently. Oh no! The gray-robed old man also noticed the huge change. He immediately grabbed Feng Ziwe and retreated frantically. Bang! In that instant, the blood-red bronze coffin suddenly exploded. Boundless scarlet blood energy and extremely condensed corpse energy surged out violently. At the next moment, from the mist that was mixed with blood energy and corpse energy, a large claw covered in long green fur suddenly reached out, accompanied by a mighty roar that sounded like a murderer. The target of the jade-green claw was Song Chia. Retreat! Yi Chen waved his sleeve and retreated with everyone. At the same time, he took a step forward and used his fingers as a saber to slash at the jade-green claw. Clang! His attack was enough to kill a perfected soul formation cultivator. However, when it landed on the jade-green claw, there was the sound of metal colliding, accompanied by dazzling sparks. With the help of the attack, Yi Chen retreated to everyone again. He then looked at the black shadow in the mist. As the mist gradually dispersed, a body that was completely dyed red with blood energy walked slowly into everyone's line of sight. Its body was extremely tall, and it was 1/3 taller than an ordinary person. Its entire body was covered in green fur that looked like steel needles, and its pupils were like two heavenly swords that could pierce one's soul. It was like a god that walked in the mortal world. Yi Chen felt pressured as soon as it appeared. Meanwhile, the expression of the gray-robed old man changed drastically as his pupils constricted. It really turned into a zombie. Yang Hao shouted in shock. He hid behind Yi Chen and did not dare to peek his head out. The Patriarch of Hell said loudly, "There's another one." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw another black shadow walk out of the almost thin fog. However, it was a humanoid skeleton. There was also a nimble flame burning between its brows, but it was infinitely close to golden. End of this chapter. Chapter 1488. In the spacious hall, under everyone's terrified gazes, a human-shaped skeleton that was dyed red by blood slowly walked out along with the martial god's corpse. The blood-colored skeleton stopped in its tracks and slowly raised its head. A bloody glow flickered in its hollow eyes, and then a cold voice came from its mouth. "Intruders of the tomb, die! Why is there another one like this?" Everyone's expressions changed when they saw that. The soul fire between the blood-colored skeleton's brows was almost golden. As the soul fire jumped, it seemed to launch terrifying soul attacks, causing Yang Hao and the rest to feel like their heads were about to explode. As for the transformed war sky martial god, his eyes were extremely frightening. His thick hair was stuck together by the thick blood, and his entire body was emitting a terrifying aura, causing one's heart to tremble. Even Song Chia could not help but groan. Yi Chen waved his sleeve when he saw that, stopping the soul attack completely. His calm eyes were a little serious. The toad had once said that a martial god could fight a void refinement cultivator. Even though it was only a martial god's corpse before them, its power and combat strength were probably still preserved. What Yi Chen was most afraid of was that apart from the martial god's corpse, the blood-colored skeleton's aura was extremely close to void refinement. I understand. In such an urgent situation, the toad on Yi Chen's shoulder suddenly said, "It said that the martial god War Sky once had a confidant. This woman's soul was shattered to save the martial god War Sky. Only her body was preserved." At this point, it suddenly looked at the blood-colored skeleton. I believe it's the Marshal God Worski's confidant, and this soul suppression formation is to seal its shattered soul. Toad, what's the point of being so calculative at a time like this? Yang Hao said helplessly. Let's think about how to deal with these two ferocious fellows. Can't you see that they're pouncing at us? That's your problem. I don't know how to fight. The toad rolled its eyes, looking like it was watching a show. It's all that stupid girl's fault. The patriarch of Yellow Spring kept grumbling to Fong Ziyue. If it wasn't for her blood essence dripping onto the coffin lid, how could the corpse have come back to life? Hearing those words, Fong Ziyue, who had retreated to the side, bit her lips. She seemed to be feeling guilty. Then she subconsciously moved forward. Miss, you can't, the gray-robed old man hurriedly said. Those are two beings comparable to spatial tempering stage beings. You're no match for them, so I suggest we leave. Old thing, you're really shameless, the patriarch of Yellow Spring scolded. You brought this upon yourselves, and now you want us to clean up your mess? Just you wait. Wait till I go out. I'll definitely destroy that bullshit chamber of commerce of yours. The moment he said that, the gray-robed old man's face suddenly turned cold. The heavenly Yuan Chamber of Commerce came from the outer realms and had inseparable connections with countless star regions. It would not be an exaggeration to describe it as a colossus in the star regions. Even an existence like the Taichu Dojo did not dare to be rude to the heavenly Yuan Chamber of Commerce. Elder Ku, Fong Ziyue suddenly stopped him and said, "Attack. I caused this trouble, and I, Fong Ziyue, dare to take responsibility for what I've done. Moreover, we must obtain that item today." Forget it. Elder Ku could not help but smile helplessly. Thud, thud, thud. At this moment, Gao Da's burly martial godbody walked towards everyone step by step. His gaze was terrifying, like two sharp swords that pierced the clouds. At the same time, the red light in the blood-colored skeleton's eyes flickered. Suddenly, it stretched out its blood-red bone palm and brazenly attacked Songqie. Clearly, it had sensed that Yang Hao was the weakest among everyone. All of you, step aside. Yi Chen took the lead and pulled Yang Hao over from afar. Then he waved his hand and pushed everyone, including the patriarch of Yellow Spring, back 3,000 meters away. At the same time, Elder Ku took a step forward. His body turned into a gust of wind and landed next to Yi Chen. A vast pressure swept out from his body like a volcanic eruption. The might caused the breathing of the patriarch of Yellow Spring and the rest in the distance to quicken. Then, shock surged on their faces. Elder Ku glanced at the two fellows who were approaching him and said, without even lifting his head, "Fellow, shall we take one each?" It seemed like he was asking for Yi Chen's opinion, but he did not get Yi Chen's agreement. Subsequently, his aura soared. He stepped forward without moving and fearlessly charged towards the martial god's corpse. Martial god Worski, if you were at your peak, even I would have to fear you. Elder Ku's eyes shone with a golden light as he walked. Unfortunately, you're just a body controlled by the revived consciousness. As if he understood what Elder Ku said, the eyes of the martial god Worski's corpse turned green, and his ferocious corpse hair grew wildly. Roar! Following the roar of a primordial beast, the martial god Worski's corpse suddenly stretched out its hand towards Elder Ku, as if it wanted to tear him apart. Perfect timing! Elder Ku shouted and slapped out with his palm. It turned into a giant golden palm that whistled out. One each. Yi Chen was a little stunned as he looked at Elder Ku, who was going to fight an earth-shattering battle in an instant. You chose the most powerful guy with a freakish body, but you left the weakest one to me. Are you looking down on me, or are you overconfident? I only hope you don't regret it. He glanced at Elder Ku with a faint smile, then stopped smiling and looked at the blood-colored skeleton that was charging at him. Boom! The red glow in the blood-colored skeleton's eyes flickered violently. When the dark, red bone claw reached at Yi Chen, it directly crushed the surrounding space. See if I don't break your bones. Yi Chen chuckled softly and clenched his fingers into a fist. As dazzling divine light surged, he threw an extremely simple punch. The blood-colored skeleton did not panic at all. It did not dodge at all. Instead, it turned around and blocked the bone claw that was extended in front of its chest. Bang! Yi Chen's punch landed heavily on its bone claw. The seemingly rotten and fragile bones were extremely hard. Only the terrifying force forced it to take more than 10 steps back. What a tough bone! Surprise flashed through Yi Chen's calm eyes when he saw that. Is this what makes an undead creature special? So powerful. Meanwhile, shock flashed through the depths of Fang Ziyue's beautiful eyes when she saw Yi Chen push an undead creature that was on par with a void training stage back with a single punch. Elder Ku had told her earlier that Yi Chen might be a void training stage old monster. She did not believe him in the beginning, but she had to believe him now. P.S. I just got home from overtime, so I can only update 1 chapter today. I'll continue writing and try to update a few more chapters tomorrow. Lastly, I haven't been able to update recently because I'm working. After all, writing isn't my main job, especially with the pandemic and the economic downturn this year. End of chapter. Chapter 1489. Roar. The aura in the hall retreated. The blood-colored skeleton seemed to be completely enraged by Yi Chen's attack. The bloody gleam in its eyes intensified all of a sudden. Subsequently, it turned into a red gleam and charged at Yi Chen. Its blood-colored skeleton was comparable to a peerless killing weapon. It was extremely hard, and any magic treasure would be crushed into powder instantly. What a powerful skeleton! The Patriarch of Hell, who was far away, could not help but sigh when he saw that this person must have been a ferocious person when he was alive. He cultivated his body to an almost insane level. Why are his bones so hard? Yang Hao asked in confusion. The Patriarch of Hell said confidently, "You guys might not know this, but a powerful martial cultivator can burn mountains and boil seas with just a drop of blood essence. A strand of long hair can cut through a radius of 3,000 meters. Their entire bodies have been cultivated into an indestructible golden body. They can be said to be indestructible for thousands of years. So, martial cultivators are so powerful." Luo Tianya's eyes shone brightly when he heard that. Roar! At the same time, the blood-colored skeleton got up and attacked Yi Chen again after being sent flying by Yi Chen. It did not do anything else. All it did was extend its sharp bone claws. With a glaring red gleam, it clawed at Yi Chen's chest hard. Again. Yi Chen's eyes flickered. "Do you really think I can't do anything to you?" He revealed his killing intent as he raised his hand and summoned the gigantic 5-elemental heavy peak. Roar! In an instant, a huge mountain descended from the sky and pressed the blood-colored skeleton heavily onto the ground. At that moment, the entire hall shook violently. Many statues and altars collapsed one after another. The blood-colored skeleton was suppressed to the point that it could not move at all. It struggled with all its might, and the soul fire between its brows surged violently as if it could explode at any time. "Your soul fire hasn't advanced to the golden level after all." Yi Chen looked at it quietly with his head lowered. He did not care if it could understand him. "Otherwise, I might have to use more techniques to suppress you." "Who exactly is this person?" Shock flashed through Fang Ziyue's beautiful eyes when she saw how easily Yi Chen suppressed the blood-colored skeleton. He possesses such combat strength at such a young age. Only the godsons of the few planets can compare to him. Wow! Almost at that instant, an incomparably miserable sound of vomiting blood rang out from afar. Then, under everyone's gazes, they saw an elderly figure heavily fly back. That figure seemed to be in a rather sorry state at this moment. His long hair was in a mess, and a fist-sized bloody hole had been forcefully caved in on his chest. At this moment, a terrifying amount of fresh blood was flowing out of the wound. "Old Ku!" When Fang Ziyue saw his opponent's face, her expression instantly changed. She did not expect Elder Ku to be no match for the sky-battling martial god's corpse. With a closer look, the sky-battling martial god's long hair was like steel needles. He was ferocious, and his eyes seemed capable of splitting the sky and earth apart. In its hand was a dazzling flying sword. Kacha! As his 5 fingers exerted force, the flying sword shattered on the spot and turned into countless pieces. Elder Ku spat out a mouthful of blood again, and his face was extremely pale. "Miss, this fiend is even more terrifying than I imagined. I'm afraid only an old monster who has stepped into the late stage can suppress it." Elder Ku ignored his injuries and rushed to Fong Ziyue's side. He forced a smile. "We can't stay here for long." Fong Ziyue's pretty face changed slightly upon hearing that. She could not help but look at Yi Chen and the rest. "Senior, you guys should leave with us. The Tianyuan Trade Association will compensate you for your losses." She knew very well that she was the one who caused everything that happened today. Seeing that even Elder Ku was no match for the martial god's body, she could only persuade Yi Chen and the rest to leave with her. Elder Ku also looked at Yi Chen and persuaded. "That's right. Fellow, this corpse was a martial god when it was alive. Its body mutated again after its death, and it's even more powerful than before." Before he could finish speaking, he saw Yi Chen advancing instead of retreating. He took a step forward and walked slowly toward the martial god's body. "What is he doing?" Fong Ziyue was stunned and in disbelief. Then she seemed to have recalled something and said hurriedly, "Senior Yi, you're no match for it. Come back." She knew what Elder Ku was capable of. Even Elder Ku was not a match for the martial god's body, let alone Yi Chen. "Fellow Yi is still too young." Elder Ku shook his head and smiled sadly. "This beast's body is extremely terrifying. Magic treasures can't hurt it at all. It's like a walking killing machine." They were not the only ones. Even the Patriarch of Hell and the rest were a little nervous at that moment. After all, they had personally witnessed how terrifying the martial god's body was. Since you were a martial god when you were alive, your body must be your forte. "Today, I'll test how powerful your body is," Yi Chen said calmly as he walked toward the martial god's body. His eyes flickered with confidence and power. As if sensing the threat coming from him, the martial god's body's eyes suddenly lit up. It was like a huge cauldron that floated between heaven and earth. Fong Ziyue's gaze wandered between Yi Chen and the martial god's body. She said while frowning, "Elder Ku, how long do you think Senior Yi can last?" "I lasted more than 200 moves." Elder Ku fell into deep thought and said in a deep voice after a while, "As for Fellow Yi, I don't think he can last more than 100 moves. Is he that powerful?" Fong Ziyue was shocked. Boom! In an instant, 2 terrifying auras exploded in the entire hall. Subsequently, everyone saw Yi Chen and the martial god's body charging at each other like 2 huge stars colliding. Yi Chen's body emitted a divine glow. It was dazzling like a burning divine fire. The martial god's body's eyes were terrifying, and its entire body was covered in green hair that looked like steel needles. Its monstrous, ferocious aura almost shook the sky. Boom! The attack between the 2 of them was like a god that shook the world. The wind blew, and a large part of the hall collapsed. It was the purest collision of physical bodies, and the consequences were too terrifying. It was as if the entire space had been forcefully erased. What terrifying power! Elder Ku sucked in a breath of cold air and protected the crowd, preventing anyone from being affected by the aura. When the dazzling light and haze dissipated, everyone saw a body covered in green hair shoot out heavily. It was trembling violently. Meanwhile, Yi Chen was still where he started. He did not move at all. The only thing he felt was the intense shock coming from his body. The result of the first clash between the 2 of them was obvious. The martial god Warsky, who was known to have reached the peak of ancient martial arts, was at a disadvantage. He actually defeated the martial god War Sky? At that moment, a cry of surprise broke the dead silence. Then Fan Ziwe covered her red lips with her hand and watched everything in disbelief. End of this chapter. Chapter 1490. How is this possible? Elder Ku was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out. He could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. He looked at Yi Chen in shock again. This brat's physical body is so terrifying. Dual cultivation of spells and martial arts. He must be a dual cultivation of spells and martial arts. Who exactly is this brat? Why have I never seen or heard of him before? In an instant, countless thoughts erupted like a tidal wave, flashing through his mind crazily. Isn't this guy's physical body too freakish? The toad who was watching the battle from the side was also shocked. Its green beady eyes rolled around. Even the War Sky martial god was defeated. Could this guy be a terrifying existence that walked out of the forbidden zone? Yi Chen's expression was calm. He looked at the martial god's body that shot out and said, "Your physical body is the most powerful I've ever seen in this world. Unfortunately, you still haven't found your own path." Path? The martial god's body stood up with difficulty. A hint of confusion flashed through his originally scarlet eyes, as if the most primitive memory of this body had been touched. However, that confusion only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, flames suddenly bloomed in his body like a prairie fire. No one knew if it was an illusion, but soon after, everyone heard a phoenix cry coming from the martial god's body. Whoosh! In an instant, a red glow shot out from the martial god's body and turned into a red vermilion bird. The vermilion bird's body was surging with divine flames. It was sacred and dignified, like a divine beast that stood in the world. Seeing the scene, Yang Hao immediately said, "What's that?" "Martial god avatar. This is the martial god avatar." Elder Ku took a deep breath in and introduced, rumor has it, that there's an extremely ancient body refinement method on Earth. It's to use the blood of the true spirit to polish the acupoints all over the body. Every time an acupoint is opened, one can obtain the power of the true spirit. At this point, he could not help but stare fixedly at the vermilion bird shadow in the martial god's body. Looks like this martial god War Sky has sacrificed the blood of the vermilion bird when he was alive. Doesn't that mean he killed the vermilion bird before? Yang Hao was shocked. Boom, boom, boom. Although the vermilion bird was only an illusory Dharma idol, it was bright red, bright and lifelike. Its huge wings almost covered a radius of 1,000 feet. Has he been forced to use his Dharma body? Yi Chen's eyes flashed, and he said softly, "True Spirit 9 transformations. Primordial demon ape physique." Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen turned into a red gleam and soared into the sky. Upon closer inspection, the red gleam was a three-eyed ape that was approximately 3 meters tall. The ape's entire body was burning with black, demonic fire. Its eyes were like burning lanterns, and a violent, ferocious chi was bursting out from the vertical eye between its eyebrows. Such might shocked everyone to the point of being speechless. "Second brother?" The toad said with a solemn expression. "No, it's not the second brother. The second brother is covered in red fur, and isn't that scary? It's just that his aura is comparable to the first brother and the second brother." As Yi Chen transformed into the three-eyed demon ape, the temperature in the entire hall skyrocketed. The martial god's body felt threatened by the overwhelming might. Boom! The two of them attacked again. It was not only a physical collision, but also a bloodline collision between the vermilion bird and the demon ape. The martial god's body and the vermilion bird's Dharma idol merged into one. Sometimes it would reveal a human form, and sometimes it would transform into a vermilion bird. Meanwhile, Yi Chen would transform into a muscular man at times, and the three-eyed demon ape at times. The demon ape roared into the sky while the vermilion bird cried. This was an earth-shattering collision that caused the entire hall to shake, as if it could collapse at any moment. What an intense and terrifying battle! Elder Ku could not help but say in shock after witnessing everything. If these two were to live in the same era, it would definitely cause an unprecedented battle. At this point, he suddenly looked at Feng Zue. "Young mistress, if this fellow ye can retreat unscathed from this battle, the Tianyuan Trade Association must befriend him. As long as such a person is given time to grow, he'll definitely become a heaven illuminator in the future." Feng Ziue's expression changed when she heard that. She was the clearest about what a heaven illuminator represented. "Break it." Yi Qin walked in the air as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. The vertical eye between the three-eyed demon ape's brows shot out a dark gleam. It immediately caused the entire space to explode, as if the sky was about to collapse. The victor is about to be decided. Everyone's expressions froze when they saw that. Facing Yi Chen's attack, the martial god's body leaned to the side instinctively. However, the dark gleam still brushed past its right arm, and its entire arm exploded. At the same time, Yi Chen took a step forward and threw a shocking punch. Bang! The martial god's body blocked it with its left arm by instinct. Crack! Its remaining arm was fractured on the spot. Meanwhile, Yi Chen's punch did not slow down at all. In the end, it landed on its chest and pierced through its chest. Bang, 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 the martial god's body fell heavily, smashing many of the hall's cornerstones. Dazzling golden blood splattered high into the air. The martial god's body landed on the ground with its head hanging down. Blood splattered into the sky. The blood emitted a bright golden divine light. Roar, roar, roar. Upon seeing that, the blood-colored skeleton that was suppressed by the 5 elemental hell peak immediately roared. It was extremely shrill. It lost. The martial god's body lost. At that moment, everyone, including Elder Ku, was dumbstruck as if they had been petrified. The most shocked person was none other than Elder Ku. He had been on void refinement for hundreds of years, but he was no match for a young man like Yi Qin. He could only secretly take a deep breath in and forced a smile as he thought to this point, "This guy is really terrifying." Feng Zhe looked at Yi Chen in a daze. Her breasts were heaving from excitement. The person before her had killed a martial god. At that moment, she could not help but recall what Elder Ku said earlier. She could not help but mutter, "Perhaps he really can illuminate the heavens." Damn it, freak! They're all freaks. The corner of the toad's lips that was hiding in the corner twitched hard. It could not help but curse. Boss is a freak, second brother is a freak, and even this guy is a freak. How can I live? After a short silence, Elder Ku eventually took a few steps forward and clasped his fists at Yi Chen in all seriousness. "Fellow, your physical body is invincible. It's comparable to a martial god's. I'm impressed. Congratulations, Senior Yi." Feng Zue calmed herself down and bowed to Yi Chen in an extremely formal manner. "Thank you for what you did today. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do. Don't worry about it. I'm just doing it for myself." Yi Chen smiled lightly. Just when he was going to say something, he saw a red shadow flash past him. It was running toward the blood-colored skeleton that was suppressed by the 5 elemental hell peak. End of this chapter. Chapter 1491. As Yi Chen defeated the martial god's body, the scene that was supposed to be extremely shocking was broken by the red silhouette. Under everyone's gaze, the red humanoid skeleton dashed towards the blood-colored skeleton that was being suppressed by the 5 elemental heavy prison peak. Yang Hao said by instinct, "What is it doing?" "That silly skeleton is clearly trying to devour its opponent's soul fire." The toad and the patriarch of hell said at the same time. Yi Chen frowned slightly upon seeing that. He did not stop them. Instead, he watched quietly as the red humanoid skeleton approached the blood-colored skeleton that was suppressed on the ground. Roar! Roar! The blood-colored skeleton roared like thunder. It seemed to have fallen into the reality that Yi Qin had defeated the martial god's body. As the red humanoid skeleton approached the blood-colored skeleton, a bright and crimson glow shone from the soul fire between its brows. It then covered the blood-colored skeleton like a tide. Roar! At that moment, the blood-colored skeleton that was suppressed on the ground roared even more ferociously. It seemed to have sensed danger and was trying to break free from the five-element heavy peak. Crack, crack, crack! The humanoid skeleton ignored its resistance and was unusually excited. It opened and closed its mouth, devouring the soul fire between the blood-colored skeleton's brows without caring about anything else. Why, it's you! The blood-colored skeleton could not stop shaking. It seemed to have recovered a bit of its memory as it looked at the humanoid skeleton with an extremely complicated expression. It's you! Why you use such a method? The red humanoid skeleton paused upon hearing that. A red gleam lit up in its hollow eyes as if it was in a daze. However, it shook its head in the next second and began devouring again. Elder Ku, who was standing aside, had his pupils shrunk when he saw that. An undead creature that can devour soul fire. Elder Ku, have you seen it before? Fong Ziyu frowned. The people looked at Elder Ku immediately. Elder Ku took a deep breath and said, "When I was young, I saw an undead creature with my master. It was like this one, able to devour soul fires of the same level to evolve itself." At this point, he shook his head and said, "That's because the undead creature set off a reign of terror in the spiritual realm. Many sects and sacred grounds were destroyed by it. In the end, a few great vehicle stage existences joined forces to suppress it. Even so, they couldn't kill it. Even the Mahayana stage couldn't kill it." Apart from Yi Qin, everyone gasped when they heard that. Extreme shock surged in their eyes. They knew very well what the Mahayana stage was. It could be said to be the existence closest to the perfected immortal realm. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were the strongest people below the immortal realm. However, such existences couldn't even kill a so-called undead creature after joining hands? Not bad. Elder Ku said solemnly that undead creature has been suppressed for countless years. Rumor has it that a Mahayana stage existence is needed to suppress it with formations and exorcism incantation. What nobody noticed was that Yi Chen's initially calm face suddenly flashed after hearing what old Master Ku said. What everyone did not know was that the undead creature that Elder Ku was talking about was called the Ghost Horde, and it was Yi Chen's sworn brother. Back then, Yi Chen came to the cultivation world from Earth. After ascending to the spiritual realm, he stepped into the devil realm to look for the void return immortal elixir to break through to the Mahayana stage. He got to know the ghost hunter through a fight. However, the ghost hunter was separated from him since then. Yi Chen thought the ghost hunter was still in the devil realm. Never had he thought that he would find out from Elder Ku that it was suppressed in the spiritual realm. With the ghost hunter's ability, only a perfected immortal can kill it. How can a few Mahayana stage powerhouses suppress it? Yi Chen's eyes turned cold as he thought to this point, unless an itinerant immortal attacked, regardless of the power of the heavenly tribulation. On top of that, it's a 9-tribulation itinerant immortal. Before stepping into the Mahayana stage, a tribulation stage cultivator would go through the 9-9 heavenly tribulation, accompanied by the attacks of the heavenly demons. If they succeeded, they would step into the Mahayana stage and sense the power of the immortal realm. After ascending to the immortal realm and going through the transformation of the immortal transformation pool, they would be able to convert their true origin energy into immortal origin. Only then would they be considered as an immortal. If a tribulation stage cultivator failed the heavenly tribulation, some of them would be killed on the spot, while a few capable ones would become itinerant immortals. Itinerant immortals could be understood as low-level immortals scattered in the world. They were a complicated existence between immortals and Mahayana stage. They were destined to have no hope of becoming immortals, but they were more powerful than Mahayana stage cultivators. Although itinerant immortals were more powerful than Mahayana stage cultivators, they could not attack easily. After all, they could survive the heavenly tribulation by cheating. If they exposed their aura, they would be targeted by the heavenly tribulation again, which would lead to unimaginable consequences. Therefore, all itinerant immortals would fall into a deep sleep or find a special place where the heavenly tribulation could not sense them to cultivate. The strength of itinerant immortals was divided by the heavenly tribulation they had undergone. They were first tribulation itinerant immortals to ninth tribulation itinerant immortals. Ninth tribulation itinerant immortals are all a bunch of old farts who are afraid of death. It seems like the immortal world has issued a decree to deal with the ghost demon. Yi Chen's eyes turned cold. That's why these old farts dare to come out in the open with the protective talisman. It seems that after the turmoil in the immortal world, the ghost's horde was implicated by me. He could not help but smirk coldly when he thought to this point very well. When I reach the spirit world, all the old farts who attacked back then will die. None of them will be able to escape. Following Elder Ku's words, everyone suddenly looked at the red, human-shaped skeleton that was devouring the blood-colored skeleton's soul fire. The soul fire between the blood-colored skeleton's brows that was suppressed on the ground was getting dimmer and dimmer, and its struggles were getting weaker and weaker. On the other hand, the soul fire between the red, human-shaped skeleton's brows was like a small sun that was dazzling, making it impossible for people to look at it directly. Kacha! In the end, the blood-colored skeleton fell heavily to the ground. Its originally extremely hard bones shattered into powder, and its consciousness was completely destroyed. Meanwhile, the dazzling soul fire between the red, human-shaped skeleton's brows turned from red to purple at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it was almost half silver. The mercury-like soul fire was like a tide that began to cover the bottom of its skull. In an instant, the almost half-silver light enveloped its entire skeleton, as if every bone had turned silver. "It's evolved, it's evolved." The toad squinted and said, "This silly skeleton devoured the former soul fire and evolved itself. Its current strength is probably no lower than soul formation. Isn't this too fast?" Yang Hao, who had witnessed the evolution of the half-silver human-shaped skeleton, was dumbfounded. When we first met it, it was only equivalent to foundation building. End of this chapter. Chapter 1492. The rest of the people were shocked. It was too fast. In less than a day, the little skeleton they encountered had grown to an undead creature comparable to a soul formation cultivator. It's normal. Yi Chun looked at the half-silver, human-shaped skeleton and said, "This is a characteristic of undead creatures, especially a heretic like it under the heavenly Tao. As long as it has a high-level soul fire to devour, it's normal for it to grow to a Mahayana stage cultivator overnight." Hearing that, Yang Hao suddenly felt that his heart could not take it anymore, as if he had suffered a blow. Is being a skeleton that fun? Then I'd rather be a skeleton. You're really daring. The Patriarch of Hell said, "Do you think it's that easy to devour soul fire?" If fellow Yi hadn't suppressed that blood-colored skeleton today, would this silly skeleton have been able to devour its soul fire so easily? That's right, this is a fortuitous encounter. Even Elder Ku could not help but say, if fellow Yi had killed the former on the spot, the soul fire wouldn't have existed, and the latter wouldn't have been able to evolve. Moreover, the process of devouring the soul fire is extremely dangerous. If you're not careful, you'll be turned around. Yi Chen glanced at Yang Hao and said with a forced smile, "Even if your spirituality is completely destroyed," Yang Hao gulped and shook his head like a rattle. "Then forget it. It's good to be a human. After all, my Yang family is counting on me to carry on the family line." Puffed. As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Zue burst into laughter. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Crack, crack, crack. While everyone was talking, they saw the half-silver, human-shaped skeleton that had undergone a transformation suddenly turn around and walk toward Yi Chen slowly. At that moment, it was no longer as ordinary as before. It seemed to have a life of its own. Its skeleton was shrouded in half-silver halos, and it looked extremely dignified, like an immortal god. Although it was only at the intermediate stage, soul formation stage, it gave many people an invisible pressure. It was as if their souls would tremble when it looked at them. Yi Wushuang's eyes flickered when he saw that the skeleton was walking toward Yi Qin. He stood before Yi Chen immediately, "Brother!" At the same time, the entire hall fell into dead silence. "What is it doing?" Song Chie stood next to Yi Chen and said coldly, "Are you going to attack us?" "Has this silly skeleton gone mad?" Even the toad had a strange expression on its face. After all, Yi Chen was an existence that could even destroy a martial god's body. Facing everyone's cold stare, the half-silver skeleton did not slow down and proceeded to walk toward Yi Chen. "All of you back off. It has no hostility towards me." Yi Chen waved his hand to signal everyone to step back. He then looked at the half-silver skeleton that was walking toward him and said, "Congratulations!" The half-silver skeleton looked at him quietly for a while before imitating a living person. It extended 2 half-silver bony arms and clasped its fists at Yi Chen. It moved its upper and lower mouth bones. Thank you." Its voice was extremely deep, like the voice of a middle-aged man who had just passed middle age. Because it was the first time it had spoken, its tone was extremely stiff. Seeing this, Yang Hao couldn't help but exclaim, "F***ck, it can actually speak. Has it really become a spirit?" Hearing those words, the half-silver skeleton scratched its head in an extremely simple and honest manner. Then it turned around and opened its arms to hug Yang Hao. "Big brother, what are you doing?" "Let me go!" "Help, Uncle Yi?" Under everyone's gaze, the half-silver skeleton ignored Yang Hao's resistance and gave him a bear hug. Although it did not use much strength, Yang Hao still grimaced in pain. Yi Chen looked at it and said, "What's your name?" "I don't have a name," the half-silver skeleton recalled and said in pain. "I don't know what my name is, nor do I remember the past." The Patriarch of Hell suddenly sent a voice transmission to Yi Chen. "Fellow, it must have been extraordinary when it was alive. At the very least, it was comparable to the war sky martial god." Yi Chen nodded calmly and said to the half-silver skeleton, "What's your plan for the future?" In reality, he wanted to take this mutant that could devour its own kind to evolve as his subordinate. However, he did not say it out loud. The half-silver skeleton thought for a long time before saying seriously, "I'm going to the Forbidden Zone." The expressions of Elder Ku, Fong Zue, and the toad changed. The toad said in shock, "Silly skeleton, are you crazy?" "I'm not crazy," the half-silver skeleton said in an incomparably serious manner. "I must go to the Forbidden Zone. My intuition tells me that I can find my past memories there." The toad was even more shocked. "Could it be that you were a ferocious person who suppressed the dark Forbidden Zone when you were alive?" Elder Ku and Fong Zue looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The Inshu Forbidden Zone was a place that could stain the blood, avoid refinement, old monsters. The half-silver skeleton shook its head, indicating that it did not know. Then, without hesitation, it strode out of the hall. Subsequently, it seemed to have thought of something and suddenly stopped. It turned around to look at Yi Chen and Yang Hao. "Goodbye, friend." After saying that, it left in the end. The Patriarch of Hell watched it leave and squinted. "What kind of ferocious person do you think this guy was when he was alive?" "We don't know." Elder Ku shook his head and smiled. "I only know that there are still ferocious people in the Inshu ruins, such as the one in the Demon Soul Forest, the one in the Heavenly Tomb, and the one guarding the Emperor's tomb." Cough, cough, cough. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by a series of violent coughs from the toad. "Say, what's the point of discussing this? Why don't you guys see what good stuff the war sky martial god left behind?" The moment that was said, everyone's attention was completely diverted. Elder Ku took a good look at the toad and said nothing else. Yi Chen looked at the toad without batting an eyelid. Subsequently, he turned around and walked toward the war sky martial god's remains. After all, this person used to be a powerhouse on Earth. He was even an existence that stood at the peak of ancient martial arts. Unfortunately, he died in the end. With your identity, your body shouldn't be exposed in the wilderness. Yi Chen took a good look at it, quietly. Subsequently, he waved his sleeve and divine fire covered the former's remains. Not long after, a pile of ashes appeared on the ground, and within the ashes there was a piece of bone about the size of a leaf. Yi Chen's eyes flashed, and he put it away without batting an eyelid. As soon as he touched it, he felt a cool sensation. It did not feel hot at all. It can actually resist the burning of flames. Yi Chen secretly observed it. He suddenly realized that there seemed to be patterns carved on it. However, the patterns and words were very small, so small that it was difficult for ordinary people to see them. When Yi Chen covered the bone-like item with his divine consciousness, surprise suddenly exploded in his calm eyes. 5-element heavenly lotus. It's actually the 5-element heavenly lotus. She's saved. Yu Han is saved this time. End of this chapter.